All right. So, George R. R. Martin has released a new book. He has released a new book called Fire and Blood, and we are here to talk about it. Now, before we get into first of all, let me just say hey to everybody in the chat. How's everyone going? How's everyone doing? Is everyone having a good weekend? All right. So, I think before we get into the spoilers of the book, we should kind of give a review of the book in general and what we thought of the book. So, as you guys know, I'm joined by LML, Lucifer Means Lightbringer, from the Mythical Astronomy podcast. And go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience. You can barely hear him. It probably is. And let me just see what I can do about that, because it is, I can see here that it's... Alright. Because I can hear you very clearly in my microphone, so it's got to be something going on with Skype. Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what it is. um, Give me 1 second, guys, to fix this. To fix this audio issue. Yes, we are. Yeah. The book is out right now. The book came out November 16th, actually. Or it was November 19th. Something like that. It's out now. Maybe I should hang up and try and call you back and see what's going on. Just give me... Is it any better? I still think it's not, because it's the Skype sound bar is not moving when you talk, but I can hear you in my head. So, okay, so I'm just going to hang up real quick. Alright. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in these. That's the thing about live things, guys. It's always get these other headphones. It's always gotta figure this stuff out on the go. Gotta figure it out as it goes. And now, let's just... We're gonna change our audio settings real quick. We're going to settings. All right. Let's try calling LML back. Oh no. All right. Are you back?
I am back, and I'm hopefully at full volume.
How is the volume,
but we'll see.
Guys?
We shall see in a minute. Moon meteors, moon meteors, moon meteors.
Moon meteors, moon meteors, moon meteors.
Some jerk was calling my symbolic analysis fan fiction the other day. Can you believe that?
They're saying the audio is corrected. Really? Fan
Woo!
fiction. It's too loud now.
Okay, cool. I compensated on my end. Let me fix it. All right. I turned it down a little bit, folks. So as we go, just let me know if it needs to come up or
All
down a little bit.
right. I'm
I
so
am, anyways.
excited.
My name is Dave, and I like to wear costumes because I'm a big dork. No, basically what I was saying earlier is that my podcast is called Mythical Astronomy of Ice and Fire, and it is very dense. I make long episodes. It talks about really in-depth symbolism. We follow symbolic motifs all through the books. It's really weighty, and so we try to have fun just to sort of lighten things up. So I tend to wear costumes, and I have banners, and we do fun things. And I'm turning my volume down just a little bit, so I'm not too loud, because it's Quinn's channel, and I don't want to come on and be louder or anything. But anyways, thanks for having me on, Quinn. Obviously, we've all been reading Fire and Blood all week. Lots to say. Lots to say.
No problem, LOML. I'll have you on anytime, especially to talk about something like this. This is a special occasion. This is a new book. Everyone's like I said, we're going to give like a little general review before we get into like major spoilers. But basically, the number one question that everyone's been asking me about Fire and Blood is, how does it compare to George R. R. Martin's other history book, which is The World of Ice and Fire? And my answer to that is, I feel like this is a much better book than The World of Ice and Fire. The World of Ice and Fire covers a wider range of topics. It's more diverse. You get to like see a bunch of different kingdoms and stuff like that. But this is, I would say, more cohesive. It's more kind of like straightforward of a story. And it takes place over about, I want to say about 100 years, right? The first 100 years of
More like 140, 150, something.
About the first 150 years of the Targaryen dynasty. It's less tedious than The World of Ice and Fire as well. It feels more like you're reading a book, like a novel, than like a history book. There's more dialogue than The World of Ice and Fire. It's like there's actual sections where you have like characters talking back and forth. But like the difference, it's not like a Song of Ice and Fire because there's no POV. There's kind of like one character like kind of like putting all this together from like a bunch of different sources. So it's like that. It's similar to The World of Ice and Fire in that way. So.
Well, I think you can really tell that The World of Ice and Fire and even The Rogue Prince and the other little short bits we've gotten were all edited. And this is the unedited version from which those edited versions came.
Yeah.
And you can really tell this is way more enjoyable to get all of the words that George chose to put in there. Because this is an interesting experiment with writing, sort of. Like, it's not a full narrative, but it's more than the coffee table book that you usually get for another series. Like, it is a narrative. It's just zoomed out a little bit at a broader perspective, and so it moves quicker. But it still moves kind of slow. Like, I mean, there's so many plot details to everything that happens. Like, you feel like these are books or movies that are waiting to be made or written out fully. So, the edited versions we got in The World of Ice and Fire really suffered from that clipping. So it's nice to get the full thing.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of detail. There is a tremendous amount of detail. Lord Zyro just gave me a super chat. Won't be able to watch live, but wanted to say thanks to both of you for all the amazing content. Thank you so much for your super chat, Lord Zyro of House Fucks Given. That is a great name, actually. Yeah, so where do we start? Where do we freaking start? Do you wanna like just start with one of the things that you kind of brought up to me when you on Twitter, which was like the Parasites. So there is, I think this is really cool and really kind of like gory and like kind of horror. So you have Rhaena Targaryen's daughter, Arya Targaryen. She one day steals Balerion the Black Dread from Dragonstone, right? And so she flies off, and she's not seen for, how long is it? Several years? For like 1 year, for quite some time. And one day she suddenly returns to King's Landing, and she's on the verge of death, right? Now, at the time, the Maester guy, he didn't tell everybody what really had happened to her. That he said she died of a fever. But like what actually happened like was in his notes. He had written it down somewhere. And basically he tells this horrific story of what actually happened to Rhaena Targaryen. And she, when he touched her skin, it was like boiling. It was like unnaturally hot. And living inside of her body were these kind of worm creatures that were kind of with like faces, and they like seem to be like creating all this heat. They're like these fire worms. So like, and then it goes on to say that this led to Barth writing his book Wyverns, Worms, and Dragons, whatever that book's called. So, and it also goes on to kind of suggest that Arya, she really wouldn't have had control over Balerion the Black Dread. He would have taken her where he wanted to go, basically. So it's kind of implied that maybe he took her to Valyria, and this is where she picked up these creatures. It was one of the kind of crazy creatures like dragons and fireworms that lived in Valyria. So my thing is, what are these creatures? Are they some kind of like proto-form of the fireworms that we hear about that roamed in the 14 Fires of Valyria? Or are they just some other kind of strange parasite that she picked up in Valyria? Or is it from some entirely different place? What are your thoughts on that, Alamil?
Well, the worms. This has definitely been one of the things that people have been talking about the most. It has led to all kinds of wild tinfoil, less wild tinfoil, theories that are pushing the edge of plausibility. All the lines are being blurred because this is one of the most sort of high fantasy things that we've seen yet. So it does sound, these parasites do sound like they could come from Sithorios, right? Like they would, if you heard that somebody got these from Sithorios, you would not be surprised. And in fact, in the book elsewhere, we're told about parasitic flies that lay eggs inside you and all that stuff. So obviously there's more than one parasite in the world. So we're not assuming that all parasites must come from Sithorios. I think it's interesting that the Valerians had contact with Sithorios. There was a place called Gogassos where the Valerians did their very worst and darkest blood magic experiments, mating slave women to animals using magic supposedly, which is sort of a clue that the blood of the dragon is probably also a result of very dark experimentation and stuff like that. So the thing is, Gogassos is right off the coast of Sithorios. So you kind of get the idea that the Valerians were tapping into that well of darkness there, and they may have gone both ways. Like the Valerians, who knows, maybe some of the horrific creatures that run around Sithorios now were created by the Valerians. Or on the other hand, maybe Valyria took some of those parasites back to Valyria. But I think that it's very believable that they did go to Valyria because, Valyria is a magically cursed, smoking wasteland. The idea that it would have a fiery version of a parasitic worm kind of makes a lot of sense. So that's for first. I got the quote pulled, by the way, whenever you're ready, but go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say I totally accept the fact that Balerion took her back to Valyria. Because if we remember in A Dance with Dragons, Daenerys really can't control where Drogon takes her. He takes her where he wants to go. So a dragon like Balerion, who's so ancient, why would he listen to what little Arya Targaryen wants? He's gonna go where he wants to go. So I totally accept that. I got a super chat. I got 4,000 of something. Not sure how much that is. But the name of the canal, Dave, from Colombia. Does that mean something to you?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. All right.
Maybe clarify that one, and we'll be happy to.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, the fireworms are very interesting. I like the idea that it's kind of like a crossover from Sithorios because there is a lot of weird stuff in Sithorios. We hear about Eustace, what was his name? The guy that took Alice Westerhill across the Sunset Sea, or he attempted to take her across the Sunset Sea. he ends up in Sithorios for about a year, stranded on an island, where they say they came across like the insects that you were talking about that laid eggs, and men that howled like monkeys, and monkeys that looked like men. So there's definitely a lot of weird, exotic stuff on Sithorios as well. It's basically kind of like, well, it's essentially South America. It's like the Song of Ice and Fire, South America, which is very interesting. And also these fireworms, maybe because we know that the Valyrians kind of did kind of these weird experiments involving animals and also humans. Is it even a stretch to say that maybe the Valyrians took something? Because you pointed out that Gagas, I can't really say it.
Gogossos.
Gogossos is very close to Sithorios. Is it possible that they took something from Sithorios and kind of made like a hybrid and created kind of like a fiery version of it, because their whole thing is like fire and blood? I don't know. Kind of like that might be a little bit out there, suggesting that they're kind of producing biological weapons almost, but I don't know.
Well, the hands and the faces that sound human-like that are on the worms definitely make you think like, oh, this isn't... Yeah, totally.
Read the quote. Go ahead and read it.
So check this out. Before I do, some people are still saying I sound distorted. I'm wondering, did you turn me up too much to overcompensate in your XSplit? Because I keep turning my thing down, and they're still saying I'm really loud. So maybe turn my input volume a little bit down in your program.
Okay.
And we'll continue to play with it, guys. And keep giving me the feedback so we can get it tuned in.
I just turned it down about 30%.
Okay, cool. So, guys, tell me if I'm too quiet or how it's going. But, yeah, I've got the quote pulled up. So, it's a little bit, there's little chunks of it. It's sort of spread out. So I want to grab the meaty one. They're talking about where they went. Let's see here. Oh, no, got to go back. So there's a lot of things to talk about with these worms, because there's a lot of theories that quickly, like Victarion's firearm, the description sort of matches Arya at the very last stages of her thing, and so people are wondering if there's a connection. So we definitely want to get to that, but let's definitely read the quote so that we can know what we're talking about. So, all right, by then, here we go. All the maester's arts were powerless against her fever, if indeed we can call such a horror by such a commonplace name. The simplest way to say it is that the poor child was cooking from within. Her flesh grew darker and darker, and then began to crack until her skin resembled nothing so much, Seven save me, as pork cracklings. Thin tendrils of smoke issued from her mouth, her nose even, most obscenely, from her nether lips. By then she had ceased to speak, though the things within her continued to move. Her very eyes cooked within her skull and finally burst, like two eggs left in a pot of boiling water for too long. I thought that was the most hideous thing that I should ever see, but I was quickly disabused of the notion, for a worse horror was awaiting me. That came when Bennifer and I lowered the poor child into a tub and covered her with ice. The shock of that immersion stopped her heart at once, I tell myself. If so, that was a mercy. For that was when the things inside her came out. The things, Mother have mercy, I do not know how to speak of them. They were worms with faces, snakes with hands, twisty, slimy, unspeakable things that seemed to writhe and pulse and squirm as they came bursting from her flesh. Some were no bigger than my little finger, but one was at least as long as my arm. O warrior, protect me, the sounds they made. They died, though. I must remember that. Cling to that. Whatever they might have been, they were creatures of heat and fire, and they did not love the ice, oh no. One after another they thrashed and writhed and died before my eyes, thank the Seven. I will not presume to give them names. They were horrors. There you go.
And I put up the illustration, because I have a Kindle version of the book right here, and this is like the illustration. You guys should be able to see that. And yeah, you can see that she was really messed up. And also the interesting thing is, it's also noted in this chapter that Balerion was also injured. Balerion also had some wounds. So that's very interesting. I know they described them at some point.
Yeah, I'm scrolling up forward here. So where did Balerion take Arya? Only one answer makes sense. Recall, if you will, that Balerion was the largest and oldest of the three dragons that King Aegon and his sisters rode to conquest. Vhagar and Meraxes had hatched on Dragonstone. Balerion alone had come to the island with Aenar the Exile and Daenys the Dreamer, the youngest of the 5 dragons they brought with them. The older dragons had died during the intervening years, but Balerion lived on, yada yada yada. Let's see. What befell her on Valyria, I cannot surmise. Judging from the condition in which she returned to us, I do not even care to contemplate it. The Valerians were more than dragon lords. They practiced blood magic and other dark arts as well, delving deep into the earth for secrets best left buried, and twisting the flesh of beasts and men to fashion monstrous and unnatural chimeras. For these sins, the gods in their wrath struck them down. Valyria is accursed, all men agree, and even the boldest, okay, blah, 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 blah. The things we found inside Arya Targaryen live there now, I would submit, along with such other horrors as we cannot even begin to imagine. And then it says, Balerion had wounds as well. That enormous beast, the Black Dread, the most fearsome dragon ever to soar through the skies of Westeros, returned to King's Landing with half-healed scars that no man recalled ever having seen before, and a jagged rent down his left side almost 9 feet long, a gaping red wound from which his blood still dripped, hot and smoking. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that sounds like he tangled with another dragon, right?
Yeah, or something else. I don't know, but yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, what? Maybe a kraken? Like, did he get pulled under for a minute and like?
Don't even get me started on kraken. I'm gonna save that for later.
Because dragons do swim over the water to fish sometimes.
Yeah, so. They do. We actually see that in Game of Thrones too. Like when they've got the dragons eating the fish out of the ship, not out of the ship, but out of the ocean. But yeah, this is a very terrifying death for poor Princess Arya. You know, I would feel bad for her. I would feel bad but she's kind of a jerk. But she also kind of had not a great mother. Her mother was Rhaena Targaryen, and Rhaena Targaryen was very, I don't know, how do I describe her? Kind of difficult, kind of like hot-headed. But she was kind of almost Visenya in Visenya's youth almost. She had Targaryen blood. She was blood of the dragon, most definitely.
It seems like Arya just got overlooked a bit. Like she just kind of got ignored. Everything was busy. Nobody paid attention to her, and she needed, a lot of attention.
She's just like shut away on Dragonstone with like no friends, and it sucks. And so she starts taking it out on like all of like the servants and everyone else. But I also wanted to talk about Messenia Targaryen, who, reading this book, I kind of found a new respect for Messenia Targaryen, and I find that I like her a lot more after reading this because I think she became a lot more interesting in my eyes. So this book it essentially starts at the conquest, when the conquest started. So you have Rhaenys and Messenia and Aegon. We all know the story. Aegon liked Rhaenys more. He spent more time with Rhaenys. Visenya was kind of more like the hard sister. She was like kind of more the warrior. Even though Rhaenys was a warrior as well. But the thing was, Visenya was infertile, it seemed. Until suddenly, after Rhaenys gets pregnant and gives birth, she becomes pregnant with Maegor. My theory is because it also says several times that people thought that maybe Visenya did sorcery. So the reason that I buy into Messenia Targaryen practicing sorcery, I have several reasons. One, she was seemingly infertile, got pregnant with Maegor. Maegor is strangely cruel. He's kind of like Joffrey. He's basically Joffrey, but he's like a capable version of Joffrey. And then also Maegor's strange infertility. So all of Maegor's children came out as these kind of twisted, bat-like, winged, scaled lizard creatures, kind of like Daenerys' child in A Game of Thrones. So to me, this kind of all implies that Visenya kind of did some kind of weird magic in order to get pregnant, and as a result, Maegor, her son, cannot have children. So it's kind of like there's a price for everything. It's like, yes, your son becomes king, you can have the son, but the line kind of dies there. He'll have no children. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think that George has basically mastered the art of creating multiple possibilities
Yeah.
and just giving them all to you. And it's kind of like Schrodinger's, everything is Schrodinger's event. And he gives you 2 or 3 versions, and he's just like, whichever one you choose to believe. We don't even know if he's picked a true version in his head.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, it doesn't really matter because he's not going to tell us. So
No.
it's just how he likes to write. And in fact, I think more writers should do this because it's interesting and it's the way that real life works.
Definitely. So
But I think, but just more specifically to comment on what you said, if there's so much blood magic experimentation with the Valerians and the Targaryens, it's hard to know. Like their whole thing is probably the result of blood magic.
Yeah.
And then you have someone like Messenia. It's strongly hinted that she was a sorceress and she was dabbling with. And really, Valerians are supposed to dabble with sorcery. That's what they do. It's not like unusual. So Messenia was doing that. Quite possibly, if she couldn't have a kid, it would make sense that she would turn to magic to try to make it happen. So that could have been the results, or that could have been the cause all by itself of Maegor's, state, or it could have been, one of those things where there's all that possibility already exists because of the dark magic that went into creating the Valerians, and it can be brought out easily. But I think the dragon, the weird dragon babies that keep popping up, is one of the strongest clues that the Valerians are the result of some sort of weird blood magic, and they actually do have reptilian DNA or some shit like that.
It's almost like Maegor almost was kind of like cursed. He ruled for 6 years, right? And it all kind of just falls apart very quickly for him. And he dies on the Iron Throne. And then it's also rumored like maybe Messenia killed him. They say perhaps she was a kingslayer as well. I don't know how I feel about Messenia killing not Messenia. Am I getting this wrong? It's rumored that Rhaena is also rumored to practice sorcery, and they're saying that maybe she did it. There's so many names, and they all sound similar, so it's like...
Oh, there's so many Alyssas and Alisanes, dude. My head was spinning after a minute.
Yeah, and then they're all rumored to practice sorcery. So it's like, yeah, so... because it's like complicated because Maegor kind of... he's not kind of the rightful king, and he's kind of a usurper, and then later his brother's son, Jaehaerys, kind of comes back and takes the throne from Maegor, and he kind of like falls from grace and ends up dying on the Iron Throne. Doesn't have an heir. But another thing I wanted to talk about with these weird lizard babies too is that he was never able to have a child. So I wonder what that says about Daenerys. Does that mean that she will always produce these same dead, stillborn creatures like Maegor did? Because that happened consistently for him. All 3 of his children came out like that. So I wonder if it's like you have one of those babies and this is all you can have. You'll always have these stillborn monsters. Because the witch does tell her that she'll never have kids.
So Rhaenyra has one of these babies after having a bunch of regular babies. Mm-hmm. I don't think she has any children after that. No, she doesn't. And I want to say there's one other lizard baby example besides Maegor and Dany and Rhaenyra. I thought there was another one, but maybe someone in the chat can fill me in. I thought there was one other one. There's so many Targaryens, it's hard to remember. But I think the obvious thing is that it's done to show you that there is actual reptilian DNA in there.
Yeah. So
the question is, how did it happen? Like, did they take dragon DNA? Well, first of all, we have to ask the question, are dragons naturally existent in Westeros, or were they genetically engineered? I tend to think that they actually exist on their own, as opposed to being the engineering, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was the engineering. There's enough clues about that, too. Fireworms and wyverns, crossed, essentially would be a dragon.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting, Quinn, that, did you notice one of the dragons, when it took a wound, the wound mortified and rotted, and even their smoke began to stink. I think it might have been Sunfire at the end. and that implies that they're not a totally magical creature. Like if it can get it, if a wound can be infected and start to putrefy or mortify, then that makes it sound like they really are an animal, just a
Yeah.
magical animal, as opposed to like the others who are are
Who are,
totally magical.
yeah, like literally like living ice. So yeah,
Right.
yeah. In the others, there's a lot that implies that they're kind of like an abomination. You know what I'm saying? Because like dragons are kind of like this representation of kind of like freedom and like life and like fire and all this stuff. And then you've got the others who are just kind of like stillness, darkness, death. It's kind of just like, I don't know. But I totally get what you mean about the dragons. If it can get infected, that definitely does imply that this is not like an entirely magical creature, and that this is kind of like a natural being. Since we're on the subject of dragons, we can talk about the Targaryen children and how they seem to they seem to thrive once they come into contact with a dragon, once they choose a dragon. So we have Aenys, Maegor's brother, who
Yeah, probably the
was,
best example.
yeah, he was a sickly child until he got his dragon Quicksilver, and then he began to thrive. He was never as strong as Maegor because Maegor was born because of blood magic, I think. But yeah, there are many examples of this happening too. Like they don't really seem to like get going until they get their dragons, which is very interesting. And it makes me think of Daenerys. She definitely goes through a transformation once she gets those dragon eggs. Like they definitely have an effect on her. And we can. And you want to say something
Can
about
I?
this?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that even before the dragons are born, she's drawing strength from the
Yeah.
eggs,
Yeah. Exactly.
and it's and the dragon dreams, which seem to come from the eggs, or the dragon presence inside the egg, you could say, might be manifesting in the dream. But she dreams of the black dragon in her famous Dany 3 chapter, where she sort of hits that turning point. It's kind of a montage chapter, but it gives you the beginning where she's struggling to keep up, and then there's this night where it gets so bad she almost wants to kill herself.
Yeah.
And then she has a dragon dream where the dragon immolates her, but she feels cleansed and strong. And the next day she's kicking ass and learning how to ride and becoming Khaleesi and shit. So it's definitely the eggs she's drawing strength from. And then, like you said, once the dragons are born, it continues to happen. We've seen enough examples of it, like with Aenys, and there's a couple others
Yeah. There's a
where
few others.
you can see that they grow stronger when they have a dragon. And we see a few more examples of the dragons being on the same emotional wavelength as their riders. When someone dies, they scream, even if they're across the city, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's definitely adds fuel to the fire of those people who think the dragon bond might be a mutated form of skin changing or green seeing magic.
There is definitely a deep bond there, and there is also a pretty big hint, and it's pretty confirmed, I would say, like as to like where Daenerys' dragon eggs came from, right? You would say, I would say it's pretty like this is where they came from. So you have dragon eggs at Dragonstone, and you have Alice Westerhill. She disappeared, and she took 3 dragon eggs with her, and it seems like they ended up somewhere in Pentos. So it seems as though this would be this would be the true origin of the 3 dragon eggs that Daenerys ends up with, because we all know that Illyrio Mopapas was in Pentos. He lived there, comes up with 3 dragon eggs, says they're from Ashai, but if there were 3 dragon eggs in Pentos that were unaccounted for, it seems the most reasonable to assume that these are probably Dany's dragon eggs. Agree? Disagree?
No, absolutely. It's the quote makes it really clear.
Yeah. So that's really cool. We got an origin for the eggs. They're in fact not from the Shadowlands, from Shai. Illyrio was flexing, was lying. So it looks like I got a super chat. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Catherine Scully. Just an observation. Both Maegor and Tywin die on the throne. Good point. Good point. It's funny too because I like how in these history books and throughout George R. Martin's series, it's always like something will happen, and then you'll get like all these different how all these different people interpreted it. like, because when Maegor dies, it's like, oh, maybe Rhaena did sorcery on him, and some said that the Iron Throne itself killed him because he had no right to sit the throne. Um, and it's just interesting to see how like the people at the time view it from so many different like angles. Some superstitious. Um, yeah, but Maegor the Cruel, he really was. He really was a douchebag, but kind of a badass in his own right. I really, really enjoy the scene where he takes the Eyrie, it's after Aegon dies, and see, okay, so everyone was all like, why hasn't Maegor chosen a dragon? And so he's like, there's only one dragon for me, and he wanted Balerion, but he couldn't mount Balerion until Aegon was already dead. So once his father dies, he mounts Balerion, and it shows up at the Eyrie, and it's so badass, and he takes the Eyrie back. And basically his brother Aenys was being made to look like kind of a coward. Like everyone called Aenys weak. It was that's kind of how Maegor was able to like get in there and kind of like, because he was viewed as the strong one. There was a lot of people that were against Aenys and called him weak because he kind of was. Like he was a little bit weak, especially in comparison to his brother. Also a tragic character. He dies on, what was his dragon's name? Quicksilver? I believe he falls off his dragon, right?
Yeah, I forget which one Aenys' dragon was. Might have been Quicksilver.
I think it was Quicksilver. But he ends up falling off, and
No, no. Hold on. Who are we talking about?
Aenys.
I don't think Aenys fell off his dragon.
Maegor's brother. How does Aenys die?
Aenys, I think he just kind of goes out weak, like he barely ever rode his dragon.
Yeah, he withers away. He withers away. Yeah, I'm thinking about the other son. Like Aenys.
So there's two people that fall off dragons. So Jacaerys of Valerion is on a dragon, and he gets his dragon gets like supposedly caught with a grappling hook and brought down by somebody on a ship when they're fighting off the Stepstones or in the Narrow Sea. And then there's Rhaenyra's son who tried to ride Syrax when that was Joffrey Valerion, and Syrax wasn't his dragon, that was his mother's dragon, and he got tossed off 200 feet, in the air over King's Landing.
Yeah, and I was thinking about someone else too that got attacked. I was thinking about his son. What was his name? Aemon or Aegon or something. The would be heir to the king that Maegor took down with Balerion. He took down.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that was an Aegon, wasn't it?
I can't remember his name. There's like, what was his name? It's Aenys' first son, the would-be king, the one that married his sister.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Right. Rhaena's husband.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that was an Aegon. But it doesn't matter. He died. No. So here's the quote about the three eggs. It says, they're talking about the fact that, they can't get the eggs back. And they're saying, if those eggs should hatch, there'll be another dragon lord in the world, one not of our own house. They may not hatch, Bennifer said, not away from Dragonstone, the heat. It is known, some dragon eggs simply turn to stone.
Yes. Then
some spicemonger in Pentos will find himself possessed of 3 very costly stones, Jaehaerys said. So that's, Illyrio is a spicemonger and a cheesemonger both.
Exactly. The ages have turned them to stone, but they will always be beautiful. But it kind of proves that they never really turn to stone. They just kind of go dormant until they come into contact with, someone, the right person, the person with, like, the right genetics. It's kind of like an incubation process. That's kind of, I think, what we see with Daenerys. And, so there's definitely that deep bond that goes all the way back to ancient Valyria. Who knows what the Valyrians were doing as far as, like, tampering with their own genetics and tampering with their own bloodlines. Because there's definitely a reason that there's, like, this great push to keep the bloodlines pure. That's such a thing. And a major thing that we also see in this book is the conflict between the faith and the Targaryens because of the incest. There was like a lot of struggle in the beginning. So we have Aegon and his sisters. They were kind of accepted because they were accepted because they were the conquerors, but their children and continuing on, like the church kind of got balls and was like, and we get to see the whole struggle. We get to see why the faith militant was kind of like de-armed and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of struggle at first. But eventually it got kind of established that the Targaryens are kind of more than men. And it's kind of like a thing of pride too, because we do know that they also thought they couldn't die of diseases, but one of the king's daughters dies of the shivers, right? Because it's like, oh, the Targaryens can't die of bloody pox and they can't die of this, and yet she died. So although the Targaryens kind of maybe thought they were above everyone else, they weren't.
Well, we know several died in the spring sickness. In one of the Duncan Egg books, we hear about that. So it seems like they might be resistant or less vulnerable. And it also could be a variation, like person to person. The Targaryens being the result of such weird blood magic. You know, some are born crazy, some aren't. Some are born lizard babies, some aren't. So you know, some have dragon dreams, some aren't. So it may be kind of a random thing, you know. Yeah. Dany's fire immunity is supposedly, you know, it's a miracle. It's not, she doesn't always have it, but it could be that like she has that ability where others may not, you know, so.
It doesn't like necessarily has to be something that pops up in like all of them. Because it's kind of like genetic diversity, you know, and not everyone's like, you have certain ones, I guess, that are more pure than others too. I wonder if, and you also have certain Targaryen children that never become dragon riders. Like, that's the thing. Only some of them actually mount dragons. I remember a long time ago, I don't know if he still accepts this, but Preston Jacobs did this thing where he was like, he did all these Punnett squares, and he was like, there's a dragon rider gene. And I don't know if that's like still holding up, but I thought that was kind of interesting, like the idea that like some of them have like this gene, and some of them don't.
I actually did like that theory. I'm famous for not being a fan of the sci-fi theory overall, which of course is not Preston's only theory, but I did like the Dragon X gene theory. At least it was you know, easy to follow, and even if he went too in the weeds with it. The idea that the females are the ones that are determinative, that seems like something Martin could be thinking about and writing, and it seemed like he was uncovering a pattern there, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, so...
Oh, hey, real quick, before we change topics, since we're talking about genetic engineering, let me ask you this long-running question that I have, okay? So, Dany hatched the dragons, it was a miracle, right? Okay, so the thing is that at some point between book 2 and 3, I think when he was doing the one of the Duncan Egg books, we find out that the last two bloodlines to be added into the Targaryen line before 2 generations of incest gave us Rhaegar and Daenerys were Blackwood and Dane. And this was Egg's parents were, Egg's mother was a Dane, and then he married a Blackwood. And then his children married each other for 2 generations, and then we got Rhaegar and Dany, which essentially means that, speaking very loosely in genetic terms, and basically wrongly, it's not, you know, Dany could be as much as half Blackwood, and she could be a quarter Dane. Now, again, it doesn't divide evenly into 25% and 50%. It's kind of random. Each child gets a somewhat random mix of their 2 parents' genetics. But the point is that George, at some point, retconned, essentially, these 2 very magical and very mysterious houses, Blackwood and Dane, into the Targaryen line right before we get Daenerys, who's able to wake the dragons. So my question for you is, do you think there's anything there? Do you think it's either the Danes being, you know, the descendants of the Great Empire of the Dawn and putting that gene back in, or maybe a little bit of that skin changer Blackwood gene awoke? You know, like if the Dragon Bond is a mutated form of Green Seer magic from way back when, maybe like adding in that Blackwood blood sort of reinvigorated it. What do you think?
Okay, so you think like the lack of like, kind of like the dilution of the bloodlines over time kind of like is the reason that the Targaryens lost their ability to hatch dragons, and that when it was reintroduced, it produced like Daenerys, and that's why she was able to bond with her dragons.
I'm not even sure why they lost it, but
Uh,
I'm just wondering if, for whatever reason, the reason why Dany was able to perform this miracle,
is
I just
because of her
wonder. It's
genes
like,
specifically.
yeah, she's got Dane and Blackwood blood. Is that
Yeah,
supposed to be a coincidence? I mean, that's weird, you know? It's
I, that does seem like it's definitely hinting at something because there's all types of special bloodlines that carry like different, I guess, I don't want to say like powers like they're superheroes, but like yeah, kind of like powers, I guess essentially. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It kind of like reactivates something. So I definitely do like that idea.
because the whole idea of crossing skin changer genes and dragon blood genes, I mean, it is a thing. It's
Hmm.
Bloodraven. Bloodraven is a cross of Blackwood Greenseer genetics and Targaryen genetics. And Jon is a cross between Stark skin changer genetics
Yeah.
and Blood of the Dragon. So I think that that's a really important thing. And in fact, I think Azor Ahai that's why it's important, is because he was the original dragon person. Nissa Nissa was some sort of child of the forest woman, and their child would have been just like Jon or Bloodraven, being a cross of green seer magic and dragon magic, or something like that. I don't like to get too specific, but the point is, yeah, it's interesting. It's like you chose two families to put in the Targaryen bloodline, and it was the Danes and the Blackwoods. And
Yeah.
I keep looking at that, going, you know.
That definitely seems special. It's definitely something going on there.
But I think people want to hear more about the worms, so we got to come back to the worms at some point. But what were you going to say we should do next?
We're gonna. I think it's time for me to talk about this. I've been holding back for too long.
Oh yeah, do it, man. Uncork it.
All right, all right, all right, all right.
I'll just mute my microphone.
So we talked about Alice Westerhill stealing the dragon eggs, but let's talk about where she went after she sold those dragon eggs and Pintos. She wanted to cross the Sunset Sea, and so you got Eustace Hightower. He was like helping her cross, and so when they're in the middle of the ocean somewhere, middle of the ocean, and it gets very stormy. It's like a crazy kind of like otherworldly storm that's like he's like never seen a storm like this, and there's like crazy lightning, and then like one of his men claims that he sees arms rise out of the ocean. What? And then they see this giant wave, and he says it was just a wave, but all of my men were screaming Kraken, 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 and yeah, it was Cthulhu. It was Cthulhu. I feel like this is like George R. Martin's homage to that scene in The Call of Cthulhu when Cthulhu comes out of the ocean and he chases the guys on the boat. Like this scene was so good. So yeah, it appears that Cthulhu waits somewhere in the middle of the Sunset Sea. It is confirmed. It is canon. Everyone just deal with it. And yeah, and it also mentions that they encountered like a Leviathan too, somewhere near Sithorios that kind of like cracked one of their ships.
Which
Um,
I think is talking about a whale.
a whale. I didn't
And
know.
that's
Yeah. I was thinking that I was thinking whale, and then I was thinking like maybe it was a sea monster. I didn't know like exactly. But
so.
yeah,
There's also mention of sea dragons too,
yeah.
which makes me think that actually sea dragons do exist. I was thinking it was purely a metaphor,
Hmm.
but not the case. Here's the quote. Brandon the shipwright and the Ironborn who came after him had both sailed the northern seas, where monstrous krakens, sea dragons, and leviathans the size of islands swam through cold gray waters, and the freezing mists hid floating mountains of ice.
Hmm.
Alice Westhill did not intend to voyage in their wake. She would sail Sun Chaser on a more southerly course. And yeah, she found krakens anyway, so that was cool.
Yeah. See, I would accept that that was a regular Kraken and not Cthulhu if the guy hadn't seen arms rising from the water. Cthulhu has arms. It was Cthulhu.
It's definitely George trying to evoke that feel for sure.
It was definitely literally Cthulhu. I'm just kidding. I just love it. I just love it so much. It's just like I feel like he gave me everything that I needed with that scene. I had so much fun reading it. I wished it was like way longer. Like I would read like an entire like long chapter that was just them trying to sail across the Sunset Sea. And then you got Alice Westhill who goes missing. Like she no one knows what happened to her. So did she get across the Sunset Sea? Did she not? Maybe we'll never know. The world may never know.
Dude, dude, I think my favorite line in the book is when you get to the end of her story, and then it's like, but
Yeah.
Corlys Valerian swore to his dying day that he saw a ragged old ship in the port of Asshai
I
that
did
could
say that.
only be the Sun Chaser. And I was like, yeah, she
Yeah.
made it! She made it!
Oh man. So yeah. Uh, maybe there's some hints somewhere. Someone will find it. If they're somewhere, someone will find it. But yeah, man, I mean, that was one of my favorite little sections. That whole thing where
It
that
was,
was, I really really liked it a lot. Um,
yeah, that had me on the edge of my seat. I was reading just every page like, ooh, they found a little island. Are they going to stay there? I was thinking about what would I do? I was like, well, I would make a base, and then I would go back home, and I would plot the chart and say, okay, well, we know we have a way base then. And so
yeah,
then I would stock up that place with supplies so that I could then launch further missions from those islands. But she was too ballsy. She wanted to just, like,
yeah.
I'm going to keep going and just, you know,
Uh, it would have been cool to stay on that island, but they all like started dying. So
well, no, not to stay there, but like I said, you would have had to basically come back there. Like, okay, we
yeah,
found this place. Let's go home, come back with more ships,
yeah,
establish it as a beachhead, and then go from there. But
yeah. So
that's
we
not
have like
fun
this
to read.
buffer point. So it's like we can like stay here. Like this is like yeah, get situated, continue on the voyage. Yeah. Ah, what should we talk about next? Oh, there's so much. There's so much. Let me see. I have so many like scattered notes here. Um, let's see. So, okay. So I forget exactly which time this takes place in. Wow, that car
Wow.
was so loud. I forget exactly which time this takes place in, but like Westeros gets affected by what they're calling like the shivers, and I liked reading this because it was very clearly George R. R. Martin's version of kind of like the Black Plague. It was carried by rats, and you have all these people starting to like, like cats become like super valuable. Everyone wants a cat in their house to catch the rats. What's interesting about this is that like I don't know how many people know this, but like in real life, because there was such like kind of like a stigma against like cats, and like people were like killing black cats in the Middle Ages. That kind of contributed to the Black Plague because like the cats weren't catching the rats, and so the rats were spreading the plague more easily. What's interesting about the shivers is that, like the Black Plague, it killed everyone. It killed something like 40% of Old Town, I think it said, or something. Was it Old Town or was it White Harbor? Like 40% of White Harbor, I think. Um, and yeah, like the ruler of the city, the leader of the city guard died, so there was like lawlessness, chaos. People were starving. Um, the master of coin, Rigo Draz, gets like brutally freaking murdered. And so like the king, who was king at that time? Jaehaerys. So Jaehaerys was a good king. He's known as like Jaehaerys the Good, I think. But like these men, when he finds out what they did to Draz, he has like their fingers cut off, like they're like disemboweled and like hung from the Red Keep. He's like super pissed about this, and I thought like that was like kind of a rare moment of seeing like Jaehaerys like really go Targaryen on these like douchebags for what they did, because the Master of Coin, he wasn't a bad guy necessarily. He did like raise like he only rose tax, if I remember correctly, he only rose taxes on like expensive things like silks, spices, specifically so that it wouldn't affect the poor people. And it's kind of sad that he got blamed for like all the kind of like suffering and like starvation that was going on in the city. And he kind of met a tragic end, kind of gets ripped apart by the poor people because they can't afford bread. It literally says that they blamed him for the cost of bread, so they just kind of ripped him apart on the street. And it's just kind of like a very just kind of like medieval reminder that this is what kind of happens when people are starving. That's like they kind of look for anyone to blame, and unfortunately he got blamed. And that kind of stood out to me, and I took a note because I wanted to kind of mention that. Yeah, that poor dude. There's another Princess Daenerys that's mentioned here too, who
Yeah,
has the
let's talk.
shivers.
Yeah, that's seemed to kind of jump right off the page and
Yeah.
hit you in the face now, didn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, Daenerys died of the shivers, eh?
hmm
That's interesting.
Because
There's, I'm being told that there's still audio issues though. You want to turn me back down a little bit or take a look, see if
what it,
is my signal maxing out or what? They're saying it's like distorted.
I can hear you clearly. I
But
don't know.
you're hearing me through Skype though. They're hearing me through XSplit, and somewhere there's a disconnect.
I don't know.
So I've turned my input way down. I'm way quieter than I usually ever am.
How is this audio now? Give a line.
We got over 300 lovely people here, and I just want to make sure we're bringing them the best experience.
How's the audio going, guys? How's LML's audio? I know
Yeah,
there's
well,
a delay.
they'll just have to tell me after I talk a little bit more. But yeah, the Daenerys is an interesting foreshadowing potential. I mean, the obvious conclusion would be like, okay, Dany's going to get turned into some sort of Night's Queen, or something like that. I also thought it was interesting that Aegon III, Aegon Dragonsbane, who is Aziz is telling me that Aegon III Dragonsbane has a ton of parallels to Jon Snow, sort of plot-based parallels.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that Aegon III marries... Yeah, maybe you need to turn yourself up a tiny bit.
I just did.
Okay, cool. So it's possible... Okay, so Aegon Dragonsbane, Aegon III, who might parallel Jon Snow,
Mm-hmm.
he married the daughter of... See, Aegon III was Rhaenyra's son, and he married the daughter of Alicent and Aegon. So essentially, the marriage of this Jon Snow parallel was uniting the two Targaryen lines. That's the point. And if
Yeah.
Jon and Daenerys were to marry, they'd essentially be uniting two parts of the Targaryen line.
So it's like their child would be like a perfect combination of like all this stuff. Maybe Daenerys can only have a child with the right person. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it needs to be like the right combination of genetics in order for her to even give birth to a proper child.
Yeah, I think they would only be a magical baby, and the same goes for Jon. When he's resurrected, unless he's brought back through green seer magic or something in a way that we haven't seen, all the undead people we've seen, their vitals don't work anymore, and so they wouldn't be able to have regular children. But maybe they could have magical babies.
Very, very interesting. And also, like, I like the idea that this Daenerys getting the shivers and dying could be like relating to the Daenerys in A Song of Ice and Fire to becoming like the Night Queen or something. Because it's like the lips turn blue and it's like all this like kind of stuff like that. So that's super interesting. It definitely does.
In general, I think there's many hints
Uh-huh.
that the creation of the others involves dragon blood, and that Night's King had a connection to dragon blood, and that there's a lot of Targaryens whose looks tend to lean towards the others. They have blue eyes and white hair instead of silver hair and purple eyes. There's a few different examples. And so every once in a while, essentially, what George is doing with symbolism is he's taking some of these Targaryens and he's implying them as an ice person. Like take Aemond One Eye. He loses an eye and puts a blue star sapphire in his eye.
Yeah.
So that's just like Waymar in the prologue with one blue star eye. Kind of reminds you of that. And then what dragon does he ride? He rides Vhagar. Well, Vhagar is called a hoary old bitch. It's the only clue we have about Vhagar's coloring. But the word hoary means frosty white with age, or like whitish gray with age. You call a hoary old man or hoary old beard. That's how you use that word. So hoary old Vhagar makes Vhagar sound like a white dragon. Now think about this, all right?
Mm-hmm.
The constellation of the ice dragon. The North Star in A Song of Ice and Fire is blue, and some people say that it's the eye of the ice dragon, and some people say it's the eye of the rider of the ice dragon. But if you look at Aemond on Vhagar, you've got a rider with one blue star eye on a big white dragon, which could be a stand-in for an ice dragon. So essentially, Aemond on Vagar is a model of the ice dragon. And so when they fight over the God's Eye, you've got Caraxes, the red dragon, with Daemon Targaryen, who's very much like an Azor Ahai, kind of figure. It's all fire symbolism for him. And then they collide with this ice dragon model. It's very much an ice versus fire dragon clash. It's one of my favorite scenes in the series, of course.
Wow. Yeah, that's super freaking cool. Yeah, I liked the detailed stuff about the Dance of the Dragons and like how it actually came about. It came about because of Jaehaerys, who had way too many freaking kids. Like Jaehaerys had way too many freaking kids, and it led to a lot of freaking problems for everybody because there was like some confusion about the line of succession. I'm not even gonna try and get into like too many other details about exactly what happened because I know I'm gonna get all these names messed up. Because like George R. R. Martin does this thing where it's not enough to just like give people like names, give people similar sounding names. Like people have the same names, like like a bunch of different variations on like different names. It's like so nuts. It's like Rhaenys, Rhaenyra, like
it gets really bad in Jaehaerys' reign. There's so many, and they're all named after uncles. It's
you're like this Aegon and that Aegon, this Aegon. It's just like, God dang it, George, why are you doing this to me? It's like so difficult to keep up with. But yeah.
So let's go back to the worms, because the worm conversation is continued throughout the chat. People want more about the worms.
Let's do more about the worms.
Okay. So first question is: are they fireworms? Are they baby fireworms? Are fireworms like xenomorphs? Do they incubate inside of living things and then hatch out and grow really big?
All right.
That's one thing I've seen.
The first thing I want to say is that if you look at this cover, they kind of look like worms. Like the dragons on the cover of the book kind of look like fireworms. I just want to say that. I don't know, just throwing that out there. And then two, I like the idea that they could be like the proto form of like fireworms. Because if she did go to Valyria, they have to have some kind of initial state before they become like the bigger creatures that are kind of legendary, that to be in like the minds of Valyria. So I like the idea that they kind of need a host to incubate, because this is definitely it's definitely like a parasite that's definitely feeding on her. And they definitely had that reaction to water, like the water like seemingly killed them. And I think the reason that she kind of became infected too, the reason that they were able to maybe incubate in her maybe better than someone else, could have perhaps been because of her Targaryen blood, So, yeah, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of hints, and what I'm most interested in too, relating to these worms, if they will show back up later on in the Song of Ice and Fire main series. I don't know if I necessarily buy the idea that Victarion's arm is a fireworm situation. I don't think it would make his arm. I think that's a different deal.
So let's address this because I sometimes am a Captain Bring Down on Twitter. We're like, what about this? And I'm like, no, well, probably not, because this or that. And then people argue again and say, well, what about this? And then I dig in and be like, no, it can't be. And I turn into a grouch, and everyone's like, LML, quit being a grouch. So we did that whole thing, and I did go deep on these worms. And here's the thing, okay? So Victarion's arm is described as blackened and also looking like pork crackling. And so Arya, at the very end, her skin is blackened, and it looks like pork crackling. So it's like, aha, it's the same language. Thing is, Arya doesn't look like that until she's just about to die.
Yeah.
And her condition is rapidly deteriorating. That doesn't match Vic. Obviously, something happened to him. He came out stronger. He's not dying or worsening. His arm is stronger, and it's not changing. It's basically the same. Also, in Arya, you can see the worms writhing around inside of her. And I have to think, if Vic's arm has worms in it, somebody would notice, probably. Or it would be described.
Yeah.
So I think that it's not connected. However, I did have people telling me that I was being closed-minded for not entertaining the possibility that Mokoro either keeps little fireworm babies in a vial, or that they materialized out of thin air and then leapt into Victarion's arm, and it's actually a big writhing tentacle underneath of there. But I think that's unlikely.
I think it's a different deal. McCorrell definitely did some kind of magic on Victarion, but a lot of magic is rooted in fire and blood, so it makes sense that like it would be using the same language to kind of describe some of this stuff. And like you said, it doesn't have, I think, the most defining characteristics of fireworms, I think. Like, why would it make him stronger, for instance? Like that doesn't.
Okay, so I already see confusion in the chat about this. So just to reiterate, Arya's skin only looks black, like Victarion's does when she's about to die. Before that, it is not black. Victarion's skin has always been black since he came out of the cabin. It is not getting blacker. So he doesn't have an early stage of worms because Arya's skin didn't look like that until she was almost dead. So the symptoms are different as far as the timing goes.
Yes. It just kind of doesn't fit.
It's just similar because we're both dealing with fire magic. Like they're both twisted forms of fire magic, and it makes sense to me that like parasites in Valyria would have a fiery nature. And so basically, like as soon as you set foot in Valyria, you are at risk.
It's a
right?
cursed place. It seems,
right. Like she could have just, as soon as Valyrian landed and she got off and tried to drink water, she could have gotten these things. So they could have come from absolutely anywhere in Valyria. It's very believable, I would say.
Yeah. Don't go to Valyria. Except she didn't have a choice. I feel like Balerion took her there. I like I said earlier, I buy that idea better. But yeah, this, like I said earlier, like this reading this totally made my skin crawl. And like I said, I love this illustration. It's like great. Like the guy is just kind of like, what the fuck? It's just kind of like, holy shit, I've never seen anything like this. Yeah, she's like, you can see that she's like she's like starved. She's like bone thin. It's just like, these things have been literally eating her from the inside out. And to me, like, I'm a person that's kind of like really creeped out by worms. Like creepy crawly worms. That's something that's always like freaked me out. So like reading this and like how they dunk her in the cold water and all the worms burst from her body. It reminds me of that. There's an internet video of like the spider that gets like sprayed and this like worm comes out of it. That's what I thought, and I just saw that. It's one of the most terrifying images that I've ever seen. Like George R. Martin really knows how to paint a picture. I want to talk more about Jaehaerys and his reign too.
That was definitely one of the most interesting parts. You should also change this picture so people don't like have nightmares. Before he kind of like had a bunch of children and you know that it was kind of complicated. So like I said before, his older brother, the would-be king, was killed by Maegor. I keep saying Maegor. Maegor. And eventually Jaehaerys rose up, became king. His uncle Maegor was dead. And he married his sister, Queen Alysanne. And though she didn't really have any power, he listened to her. So she really did have power because he listened to what she said. And an interesting bit about Queen Alysanne that I really enjoyed reading. This is really interesting. When she flew her dragon to the wall, she tried several times to take it into the north, beyond the wall. And the dragon wouldn't fly beyond the wall. And she herself was like, this is kind of disturbing. Like, why won't this dragon fly beyond the wall? So that is very interesting to me, and I want to comb through this book some more later on and see if there's any more hints as to why the dragon wouldn't fly beyond the wall. And it also kind of brings into question last season of Game of Thrones, Daenerys with the dragon flying through the wall. Because it's literally like she said, every time that she would try, the dragon would literally turn around. Like, there's something here. It's like I will not go here. So that was very interesting to me. There's got to be some kind of, I think, magical explanation. There's something that the dragon senses north that it's kind of rejecting, saying that I don't want to go here. Do you have any thoughts on that, LML? Because I'm just gonna keep talking about Alysanne. Well, yeah. Think about those worms we just saw. Mm-hmm. Think about how they reacted to the ice. The ice actually killed them. So the between the dragon flying away from the wall and those worms, you kind of feel like George is dropping clues to be like, hey, the dragons just aren't going to fly up there and melt everything. Like, hey, that was easy. Yeah. Like, no, the others they have a weakness to ice, and that the ice that the others have is a magically active ice that burns.
Yeah.
So I would expect the others to be able to fuck up the dragons potentially. Maybe not exactly like what we saw on the show, but they're going to have some way
some defense,
to hurt the dragons, I would say.
I think so too. Yeah, so that was a really interesting bit. I kind of like thought about that for a while. Like, what can that mean? And I also really admire Queen Alysanne. She's much more level-headed than her sister, Rhaenyra. Not Rhaenyra, Rhaena. She's much more level-headed than her sister, Rhaena. Rhaena's very fire and blood, and Alysanne was much more like kind of sweet, compromising. One of the things that I really liked that she did was abolish first right, which was, as we all know, the really like messed up tradition where like the Lord could like rape a woman on her like wedding night or some. I think it was something like that. And she basically went up there. She talked to the women at Molestown, and she was like, "This is wrong." And she basically convinced Jaehaerys to outlaw it. So I thought that was really interesting. And then Jaehaerys did a lot. He ruled for like 60-something years, I think. Well, not 60 years. He ruled until he was around 60, I think. He ruled for a really long time, and like the kingdom prospered under them. He built roads. He just did a lot of good things for the kingdom. It was kind of like his children directly following him that kind of like screwed everything and led to the Dance with Dragons, because Alysanne kept popping out those kids. They had 13 children. Not all of them lived to adulthood. I think most of them actually died. But they had 13 kids, which is just like incredible to me. 13 children. Yeah, a lot happened during the reign of Jaehaerys, though.
Well, so before we go on, I just want to add on what you were saying. Yeah, that was really cool to see the influence that Alysanne had, and in particular, it was really cool seeing her meet with all the women at Molestown, and then to hear about the sort of deliberations. And yeah, Jaehaerys, and his young Jaehaerys seems kind of cool, but as the story goes on, like there are several moments when you're like, Jaehaerys is pretty sexist, or Jaehaerys is kind of being stupid here, or Jaehaerys is kind of being a dick. Like, there's definitely some moments that he made, that were some rough patches, and he had to be talked into this by Alysanne. Yeah. So, yeah, that was cool because, it's a barbaric practice, and it's just awful, and it does violate everything in the seven-pointed star, like the Grand Maester was saying, or the High Septon rather. But let's talk about that first night practice. I think it's not a random horrible thing that George included. I think it derives from green seers and skin changers, essentially trying to find more of their ability. Like, think about it. Varamir has several children with different women. None of them had the gift. Okay, so I believe that in the first, in the Dawn Age and the Age of Heroes especially, it's very likely that a lot of the kings would have been green seers and skin changers, just like your Ward King, your Marsh King, your Ancient Starks, Varamir Sixskin setting himself up as a petty lord. I think that if you think about a barbaric age where might makes right, skin changers would have been the mightiest by far. And so it's natural that they would have become kings. We're given clues that they were kings. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of makes a perverse, messed up kind of sense that they're trying to sow their seed as many places as possible just to find one other skin changer or green seer to be king after they die. Or even from a magical sense, like, Bloodraven's waiting, he's clinging to life until Bran is born because there needs to be, apparently for some reason, somebody sitting in that throne that's not a child of the forest. And so that's probably where the first night came from.
That kind of relates back to your thing about, like, needing, like, the proper combination of genes in order to, like, kind of make something work. Like, Varamir had all those kids, but none of them had the proper combination of genes in order to actually be skin changers, or so that.
And yeah, obviously, I know that First Night is a thing that existed in medieval Europe. It's worth saying. Thank you for pointing that out. But I think in the story, I think that the reason why the first men practice it and not other people is because the first men were trying to produce more of these rare skin changers and green seers. But that's just speculation. I mean, like I said, the example is kind of Varamir. Just look what Varamir does. He sets himself up as a petty lord, and he sows his seed everywhere. And then he comments on how he's disappointed that, none of them had the gift.
So, I know
By the
you're...
way, I'm not endorsing the first night or giving a
No,
justification. Just to be clear, it's
of course
horrible, it's
not.
rape, and whatever. You know.
So I know you're doing a stream tomorrow, right?
Yep.
On who killed Septon Moon.
Well, I mean, that was just my joking name because obviously I was very excited about
Yeah,
all the Septon Moon stuff. But it's just gonna be a mythical
yeah.
astronomy panel. We're gonna all react to Fire and Blood. I got Aziz and Melanie and Amanda and Amanda Crowfoot's daughter's on there, and Maester Mary. I think I've got it.
Hmm.
Got so many people. In any case, no, not Maester Mary. It's oh shit, it's so embarrassing.
The Septon Moon stuff was really kind of funny to me. Because he's like a septon, but it's just like he's like, oh yeah, like let me have sex with your wife and daughter, and like I have like they'll get pregnant. Do you think it's kind of like almost kind of like a reference to maybe like Garth the Green Hand, like how he's like kind of spreading his seed around and he's like kind of
Yes,
super fertile.
I'm so glad you picked up on that. He's
Yeah.
absolutely a Garth character. And by the way, it's Storm Emma that's the fifth person, not Maester Mary. I'm gonna have Maester Mary on a Between Two Weirwoods very soon. But in any case, yeah. So that is 3 Eastern tomorrow on my Lucifer Means Lightbringer YouTube channel. If you want to hear some more Fire and Blood talk. As
Hmm.
far as Septon Moon goes, yeah, he spreads his seed. He's a big, like bawdy dude, and the language around him is almost exactly like Garth. I've
Yeah.
got the quote right here. It says, barefoot, bearded, and possessed of immense fervor, the poorest fellow could speak for hours and often did, and what he spoke about was sin. I am a sinner were the words which Septon Moon began every sermon, and so he was. The creature of immense appetites, a glutton and a drunkard, renowned for his lechery, Moon lay each night with a different woman, impregnating so many of them that his acolytes began to say his seed could make a barren woman fertile. Such was the ignorance and folly of his followers that this tale became widely believed. Husbands began to offer him their wives, and mothers their daughters. And that's very much like the Garth
Yeah.
story.
This guy was so unbelievably full of shit. And he's like the 7 Pointed Star is the only book I've ever read, but no one had ever seen him reading a book ever. And it's just like, the guy probably can't even read. But yeah, but the thing is, who killed him? So it's very, very mysterious. Like it's like it's like an average night. It's got the girl in his tent. She comes out screaming, and he comes out with his throat slit. She kind of disappears into the crowd, and it says, "Perhaps it was a faceless man." I don't think it was a faceless man. Like 'cause it brings up some reasons why it wasn't a faceless man, and I feel like this is also. I always pick up on this stuff, so don't get mad at me. I also feel like this is kind of subtle shade at Game of Thrones for the portrayal of the faceless men in the later seasons as people that just kind of run around and stab people in public, because it's not what they do. Like
Oh yeah,
they
that's
use
true.
poisons. They sneak around. They don't just like they make it look like an accident. So like this book actually notes this doesn't look like the work of the faceless men because they don't usually kill in this manner. But who was it? Do you have any thoughts? I've been trying to figure this out. I there's a few possibilities, but I don't have anything solid. I can't even really like make a solidified guess. But I feel like the answer might be there somewhere hidden in the text.
It seems to me like it's just a simple matter of there are several people that were powerful politically that wanted him dead,
Yeah.
and the woman that killed him was probably nobody special, just somebody that they hired, unless she was a faceless man,
Maybe.
faceless woe man, of course. But yeah, probably it was just. I mean, it says even in there, like the likely answer is just that, she's just an assassin that was
Simple as
hired by
that,
somebody who wanted him dead, and there's a bunch of people that wanted him dead because he was preaching against the High Septon and preventing. That was right when Jaehaerys and his royal court wanted to go to Old Town to sort of be crowned and put a bow on the whole Maegor thing and heal
Yeah.
up with the faith. And Septon Moon was in between, literally blocking the road to get to Old Town, and then he just dies. So,
Um.
But there's Quinn. You're gonna like this. You must
Okay.
not have found this, otherwise you would have. you would have said something. There is the ultimate George Martin shade that he
Okay.
throws on Dave and Dan.
Let's have it.
Yeah, well, let me just...
I can't wait. Yeah, Septimus was an interesting guy. I was kind of glad to see him die though, because he's going on and on and on about blasphemy, abomination. Meanwhile, he's a gigantic hypocrite. Like, he's not following anything in the seven. And it's crazy. It's funny to me how like kind of his followers just accept it, and that's kind of a behavior that you see in real life as well. You've got these people that people will kind of like bolster up as like they're kind of like, oh, this is a holy person, but then when you really look closely, they're not anywhere near holy. And then you kind of have their followers who kind of just accept it, and they kind of like let them get away with kind of the messed up stuff that they do, because it's the holy man. It's kind of like, I don't want to like get into anything, but yeah, we see that in the real world. Zoom just gave me a super chat. Hi Quinn and LML, just a quick hello. Hello, how are you? How are you, dude? So,
Zoom.
yeah.
Just give me a second. I'm looking for the shade. It's
All right.
it's hard to search when you've only heard the quote once.
It's cool. So, yeah, I'm looking at the chat now. Before we get on to the next thing that we're going to talk about, how's everyone doing in the chat? So, does everyone have the book? Because we are talking spoilers here in case you just got here. WKC says, props to Ideas of Ice and Fire. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you so much. Ideas of Ice and Fire, Moon is a cult leader. Yeah, he is, definitely. Very much in the same vein as, I always talk about Jim Jones, who convinced all those people to drink Kool-Aid, well, Flavor Aid, actually. But the thing is, one thing that people don't necessarily remember about Jim Jones is that it wasn't just mass suicide. It was also a murder-suicide. There were many children that were forced to drink the Kool-Aid, and adults as well. But yeah, so it's kind of like that cult mentality. Definitely, people will kind of overlook things for like the leader. Like this is our holy figure. Everyone has the book. By the way, check me out on Patreon, because I am giving away a free copy of Fire and Blood. So if you don't have it and you want one, I'm giving away a free copy of Fire and Blood to one of my patrons. So you can be a $1 patron and you could still get a chance to win the free copy of the book. So just check that out, guys. No, I don't have it, but welcome to spoilers. You know, like I said, some books are kind of a reality to be experienced. You know, I feel like spoilers are kind of, people kind of go on and on about spoilers sometimes. Sometimes, you know, spoilers are okay. And you can just kind of experience the journey, you know what I'm saying? We can see Quinn right above LML's head. Yes, you can. I tried to get it to like kind of do a split screen thing, but this is like a weird new Windows version of Skype that it's like, I don't know how to use it. It's kind of really annoying actually. Why'd you just change my Skype randomly? It's aggravating.
Oh, they can see you in the very tiny little corner, in the upper corner of my Skype.
Right
Yes.
here. I tried to get it to splits. I don't know how to do it on this new version of Skype. I don't know. I feel like an old man. Like, I don't know how to do this. Freaking Windows Update. You can't spoil history. Exactly. Like a lot of this stuff in Fire and Blood is brought up in other places. Like some of this stuff was brought up in the World of Ice and Fire. For instance, when Aegon Targaryen takes Harrenhal, that's in the World of Ice and Fire, if I'm not mistaken. It's either in the World of Ice or Fire, or it's in something he released previously. I'm pretty sure it's in the World of Ice and Fire. It's not as in great of detail, but that was also one of my favorite scenes, because you have Harren, who's like, stone doesn't burn. I built my castle out of stone. And so Aegon says, if you don't surrender, your line will end tonight. And so they're waiting. He locks up his castle. They're all waiting for Aegon, and they're like, oh, he's not coming. But Aegon has taken Balerion way up into the sky. And when the moon rises, he descends down onto Harren's castle, down onto Harrenhal. And yes, his castle was stone, but there was also wood and hay and flesh, and all of that burns. And it was kind of a horrifying scene, and it smoldered for like days and days and days. And even the stone began to melt, and it's like described as like from a distance, the towers of Harrenhal looked like giant melting candles. So that was like the ultimate like just boss move on Aegon's part. Gave him a chance to surrender. Harren the Black, being ironborn as he was, thought, oh, I've got this giant castle. So I've got this giant dragon, and that kind of trumps giant castle.
This is one of the. I did find the quote, but just to comment on what you were saying, this is one of those moments where George is clearly laying the groundwork for what's going to happen when Daenerys starts using her dragons in battle. Yeah. Like, it's no coincidence to me that, right after A Dance with Dragons, which is where we're just starting to see Dany with the ability to fly her dragon, we're suddenly getting all this backfilled history about what happens when dragons fight. We see what happens when a dragon fights an army. Thousands of people get burned alive. We've seen what happens when dragons fight each other in the sky. Everyone dies. Yeah. That's essentially, and it's a bunch of horrific things. So we should expect now to see, one of Dany's dragons get in control of someone that doesn't like her, whether it's Euron or the Night's King or Victarion or Phaegon or Tyrion, who knows? Maybe Jon and Dany will fight. But if two dragons fight, we can expect most everyone to die and the outcome to be horrific.
Yeah, it doesn't.
That's like one of the...
I was just going to say, it doesn't end well.
No.
Definitely not. One thing that I... So, go ahead.
Oh, do you want to hear the shade quote?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So George is talking about maesters copying books, okay? And he's just been talking about that, a caution for young girls, which is a really funny thing. Yeah. So it says, over the years and centuries, as the book was copied and recopied, many changes and emendations crept into the text. The maesters who labor at the Citadel copying books are rigorously trained to reproduce the original word for word, but few mundane scribes are so disciplined. Such septons, septas, and holy sisters as copy and illuminate books for the faith oft strike out or alter any passages they believe to be offensive, obscene, or theologically unsound. As virtually the whole of a caution for young girls is obscene, it was not likely to have been transcribed by either maesters or septons. Given the number of copies known to exist, hundreds, though, as many more were burned by Baelor the Blessed, the scribes responsible were most likely septons expelled from the faith for drunkenness, theft, or fornication, failed students who left the Citadel without a chain, hired quills from the free cities, or mummers, the worst of all. Lacking the rigor of maesters, such scribes often feel free to improve, quote-unquote, on the text they are copying. Mummers, in particular, are prone to this.
Damn. Roasted. Damn. I don't know. Wow. That's some classy shade. And it's
I'm just talking about the maesters. I don't know what you mean, Dan. Everything's fine. I love you guys.
George R. Martin. See, I love it because George R. Martin is so shady subtly. I love watching him because I love that. Like I always say, I love that clip at the Emmys this year when the guy asks why is the show winning, and he goes, I don't know. Ask David and Dan. I love that. I love it. Yeah, but George R. Martin is such a master. George R. Martin is such a master.
I thought of you instantly. My friend Ravenous Reader found that, and she posted.
Thanks,
and I was like, "Oh, Quinn's gonna die."
Oh,
but somebody was asking about the whole reliable narrator thing, and the fact that this is all being told through the Maester. So you want to talk a minute about that?
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that we have to, like, definitely kind of read between the lines in certain places and kind of like fill in the blanks as to like what really went down. Like for one thing that I have a problem with, that I don't really trust the account. What was Maegor's one wife named Tien the Black, I think? She was accused... What, your audio went out. What'd you say?
Tyanna of the Tower.
Tyanna of the Tower, alright. She was accused of being responsible for poisoning Maegor's other wives and leading to, like, those deformed children. And it says, like, yeah, this is what happened. That's definitely not what happened.
Yeah, I don't think
so. It's like, Like she did not do that. So it's interesting. But she was an interesting character as well. She's kind of like a more like mystic character that might have dabbled in sorcery, and she's one of the ones that I kind of want to know more about as well. Diana of the Tower. So that's really interesting, and I feel like there's probably a lot more of those examples that I'll probably pick out as I continue to like read this book over and over again. But yeah, like I always say, you really can't trust the Maesters because it's always from a very narrow perspective. Like they're looking at it from the perspective of a Maester, and they're gonna omit certain things, and they're gonna kind of try and sway you in a certain direction. They're gonna yeah. So there's a bias, definitely. There's definitely a bias coming from the Citadel.
I think it's a brilliant conceit.
Yeah.
In order to write this kind of book, because you have in-world historians, and putting it in their framework gives you, it gives you a way to limit how much information you get. Because George is a riddler. He loves making puzzles. He's giving us riddles and clues about the main series in all of these side books, whether it's The World of Ice and Fire or Fire and Blood or The Princess and the Queen. He just loves leaving these riddles for us, and I think that I lost my train of thought. Okay, so nope, I definitely lost my train of thought. What were you saying right before we went into this?
What were we saying?
I don't know. Oh, the Maester. Okay, so
the Maesters,
the whole idea is like this is a great way to give us unreliable narrator information.
Yes.
It's something that he's cultivated in A Song of Ice and Fire, the unreliable narrator. He's giving us information all the time, but we never know how true it is. And it forces us, the reader, to think and engage with the books, much more so than a narrator who just spoon-feeds you all the omnipotent, viewpoint information. And so writing it through the Maester's point of view is a way to continue the unreliable narrator into the world book format. And that's what freed him up to write this way, and it's really working for him. You can tell he's having fun with it.
And I remember George R. R. Martin actually saying that he is not a fan at all of the kind of omniscient narrator thing, and he is not looking to like bring that trend back. So I definitely like the way this book is written, and like I said, it's much more cohesive than The World of Ice and Fire. Like the biggest complaint with that book that people had was that it was just kind of like tedious to read. And see, my thing is, I never kind of looked at The World of Ice and Fire as like a book that you read from beginning to end. Like it's always been kind of a book that I've always just kind of picked up, read sections from, put back down, picked up again. But this one, you could read this book in one sitting, if you want. I did. So, yeah. But okay, one thing that I wanted to talk about that I thought was really cool was like some of the stuff that was going on with Rhaena Targaryen, Dragonstone. So, you have her husband, who was named, he was, what was his last name? I think he was, of House,
Farman.
Farman. Right, so he was kind of like, kind of the butt of all jokes. There was like no love in their marriage. Rhaena Targaryen basically treated him like crap. The servants laughed at him. All of her friends laughed at him. When her mother dies, she flies back to King's Landing, and she doesn't let him come with her. And that was kind of like the final straw. So basically, he starts poisoning all of her friends. And once she finds out about it, she's like, I am going to chop off your genitals, set them on fire, and feed them to she's so pissed. She's like I am going to kill you in the most brutal, messed up way. And he's like, you know what, I can fly too. And he jumps out of the window where the painted table is. And so I just thought that was like a really kind of like crazy like scene to watch that all unfold. It was kind of didn't have to happen. It was kind of Rhaena's fault in a way, because she didn't have to like kind of treat him so poorly. And even the men at Jaehaerys' court were kind of like, yeah, like I wouldn't have tolerated that in my household, like her treating me like that. But yeah, I thought that was another one of like the sections that I had a lot of fun reading too.
So I thought that was cool because it's George like giving us that version of the serial killer who's like a shut-in, and he likes take every little slight, personally, and he develops this little warped, insular point of view where nothing's his fault and everyone overlooks him, and all of a sudden, Jeremy's spoken,
Yeah.
glass today.
Yeah, he's definitely because he was kind of just like oh, they all treat me like shit. He's kind of just like smoldering on the inside, and he just finally snapped and he starts
Oh, he's the
poisoning everyone.
stapler guy from. I didn't get a piece of cake. That was my
From
stapler. I was told I would get an office, and my
he
paycheck
just
hasn't
snaps.
come. And I'm going to burn the whole building down. I'm going to set it on fire.
Yeah, basically, and it was just kind of like, and he just dies like a disgraced, kind of pathetic man. But at least I think he killed himself instead of letting her mutilate him. Like, I'm glad that he kind of escaped that fate. So that was. Yeah, I kind of feel bad for the guy. I do, but I bet Rhaena Targaryen is not easy to live with. She's not been the same since her brother and husband died. So yeah, that was that was a great one, a great little session. Let me see. I have a bunch of notes here. I know I took some notes in my actual Kindle version of the book too. Let me pull up what I have there. Because I had to get a Kindle version because the nearest bookstore to me is like 40 minutes away. Kind of sucks. Like no one reads around here for some reason.
Yeah, there was also, I'm seeing in the comments, definitely there was a couple of really cool gay characters that were in the story. Was it Rhaena?
Was
Yeah.
Rhaena?
Well, so it's the names, and the one that married Farman. That's Rhaena, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, she clearly married him
Yeah.
to get to his sister.
She was around women all the time. That she had all like these female like maids, so she like yeah. So that seemed
Yeah.
pretty obvious. And then there was the other Targaryen prince, I think, that preferred the company of men. Was he a prince?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was Laenor Valerian,
Laenor Valerian is what I'm thinking about.
and then there was another gay Targaryen woman somewhere in there too. But she had one of the names that everybody has a bunch of times, I think, so I forget.
Yeah.
And then there's also, I thought it was cool, like, even, more people are talking about, people that are asexual. And that was sort of Vagon. He basically had no interest in in sexual things from either gender. And he basically was just sort of a cranky, scholarly dude. And they made him an Archmaester, and he was totally happy with that. And that's just who he was. So it's cool. It seems like George is, I don't know if he's branching out or we're just getting more characters, and he's continuing to, keep that sort of diversity in mind and give us different kinds of folks. So it's pretty cool.
Definitely. Hold on, I'm just looking at something.
Yeah, Rhaena was definitely gay, but she also suffered from PTSD because of Maegor. A lot of people suffered PTSD because of Maegor. That is definitely true.
All
Yeah,
right.
there was a couple of princes in there. Yep, a couple of rainbow princes.
Yeah, because I remember like George R. Martin did this interview and someone was like, "Are there gay characters in your book?" Well, Daenerys. Is Daenerys not bisexual?
She's sort of
I mean,
experimental.
she's kind of doing the experimenting thing. I don't know, but definitely there were a few in here that I definitely picked up on and noticed. Actually, yeah. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about how King's Landing kind of like sprung up. So it was Aegon Targaryen that initially settled King's Landing. He built like this like little wooden castle initially, but it wasn't. I think it was Aegon who started the progress on the Red Keep, but it was finished by his sons Aenys and Maegor, if I remember correctly. And it was actually Maegor that finished it. And when he had it finished, he had all the people that built it murdered and buried beneath the castle because he's just like kind of a messed up dude. And then later it was Jaehaerys that went on to like build cobblestone and kind of like turn it into a city. And so it kind of sprung up in like that way. And the population of King's Landing actually grew rather quickly because a lot of people were thinking that Aegon Targaryen would rule from Dragonstone. Like no one expected him to rule from like this to like build an entirely new city and to rule from like essentially what was just like a clump of dirt. It was basically just like a dirty, like kind of like gross wooden castle, and it was cool to see it be built up.
Yeah, definitely. That was fun to see a city get built. Yeah, you can almost like close your eyes and see the sped up like stop motion of like the city coming together, and it's like it's spread out all haphazardly. And then at a certain point, they're like, well, we should really make a square and some straight roads, and then you can see it sort of shaping up, and yeah, it's fun. And it's cool because I'm from the East Coast, and on the East Coast, a lot of cities like Philadelphia or Washington D.C. they're like that. The streets were set out back in the horse and buggy days, and a lot of them are very narrow. Like if you've ever been to Philly, there's whole parts of the city where the roads are just really narrow. Everything's got to be one way, hardly any sidewalks, and then it's like so you've got patches of the city that are very old, and then other parts that are clearly been updated and planned later, and you get this weird sort of thing. And then there's other cities like Orlando where it's just planned out in a nice neat grid from the beginning. So
yeah, I like how George R. R. Martin clearly has like a real deep understanding of history, because he explains like so much like the economics of this. I was very intrigued actually. That's something that could be boring, I think, but the way George R. R. Martin described it was very intriguing. Like I found it was very interesting how like the economics of the city, like how it was like they had to start charging like a gate tax, and like they started taxing like spices and like silks. And I like the way they did it because it was like, we're going to tax like the luxuries so that no man can say that they're being oppressed by these taxes. That's kind of a philosophy that I kind of like. Like, why would you tax something? It's like, because like they tax things like salt, spices, silk. So it's like, you can still eat, you just have to like forego salt. So I thought that was very interesting. And I like how George R. Martin, George R. Martin was a history major, says Christopher, you guys' names are so nuts. Christophorus E. Yeah, George R. Martin was a history major, I guess. I don't know. Was he? I thought he did journalism. I know he loves history. But yeah.
Yeah, but I know he studied Norse myth in detail for several years as well. But yeah, I mean, the history major thing sounds right. I'm not huge into like knowing all the facts about George, but it wouldn't surprise me. He obviously has detailed knowledge of particularly medieval European history and War of the Roses and all that crap.
Yeah, because there's stuff in here that I wouldn't have even like thought of actually. So I just thought that was very cool.
Well, hey, you mentioned Starks a minute ago, and a few people have asked us to talk about Stark. So There's Roddy the Ruin and the Winter Wolves. There's Cregan Stark. There's Torrin Manderly, who was a steadying influence during the dance. Want to grab one of those?
Yeah.
I like Roddy the Ruin and the Winter Wolves. They're pretty easy to love, and you start to see how that whole thing about the North, like the old men going out into the snow and going hunting, you can see how that flips on its head when it turns out that the North, because winter is coming, all the old men are like, well, let's go to war, and so you've got this army of people who already consider themselves dead, and they've got nothing to lose, and they can fight differently and more aggressively than other people. It's kind of terrifying.
I like this quote right here. They called themselves the Winter Wolves. We have come to die for the Dragon Queen, Lord Roderick announced at the Twins when Lady Sabbatha Frey rode out to greet them. Meanwhile, muddy roads and rainstorms slowed the pace of Aemon's advance, for his host was made up largely afoot with a long baggage train. So I just like that. I like they're just it's a really cool section of the book.
They definitely kick a lot of ass.
Queen Rhaenyra.
And Cregan is...
But God, like the Starks aren't... Yeah, Cregan. Yeah, the Starks aren't really like the focus of the book. They're kind of like mentioned here and there, but like essentially like the bulk of this book is like the Targaryen lineages. Targaryens. Like just like a shit ton of Targaryen names.
Yeah, so... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and even the parts where the Starks are mentioned, it's all wrapped up in what they were doing in relation to the Targaryens. But what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, well, yeah, it would be nice to get some Stark history book
Yeah,
That's, and it might not be this big, but going back 8,000 years, you could maybe put more some of their folk tales and myths in there too. I don't know.
I'm sure the Starks have some more interesting stuff going on. Like some of the stuff in here got me really intrigued, and like I've always been really intrigued about the history of the Stark stuff. But I think also the Stark stuff is probably very tied into like the history of the others and the Children of the
Yeah.
Forest. So there'd be a lot of stuff in there that he might not necessarily want to reveal, and I think
Yeah.
that's why he's kind of like restrained with like giving any like concrete details on what exactly was going on there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how about all the dragon eggs? Like, so Dragonstone apparently at one point
Shit ton
had
of eggs.
tons of dragon eggs, yeah, all
Yeah.
over the place. Vaults
so,
of them.
So where they all go? Yeah, I know.
Probably
I feel
still
like
there.
some of them are probably. Yeah, I was gonna say some of them are probably still there. So it begs the question, like if they're found, could maybe like someone like Daenerys or Jon get those eggs to hatch, perhaps? I would wonder if that is gonna play a role in the story at all. Probably not. This is a question that I have too. How much from the winds of winter to a dream of spring, how much time do you think will pass? Because that's always been a question that I've wondered about. Do you think this will be over a course of years? Because when we think about the previous long night, it says it lasted a generation, literally. That children were born and lived and died. So it's like, so do you think we're gonna get several years of long night?
No, no, I think the long night's going to fall, and as soon as it falls, it's going to be an emergency, and they're going to deal with it right away. So this long night will only end up lasting, like a few weeks or something like that, because obviously we've got to see it at least
Gotta wrap
beginning
it
to
up.
end. Yeah, by the time the book is over, and he's not going to be able to do a time gap.
Yeah.
So
'Cause I
Dream,
know.
A Dream of Spring is going to pick up right where Winds of Winter left off, inevitably, I would say.
I definitely think so, and I know some people, because the reason I brought it up, because I know some people have this idea that it's like Daenerys and Jon have a baby, and that baby grows up, and then the baby is the one that fights the White Walkers, and I've always said, I don't know if there's necessarily enough time for that to take place, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah.
But I do wonder, like, so the Faceless Men
Yes.
apparently got an egg from Euron. That seems
Yes.
to be what happened. And so,
Where do you find the egg?
well, I was more coming at it from why do they want the egg and what is the value of the egg?
Mm-hmm.
Is there, beyond just hatching a dragon, my favorite theory is that they can be used to make bombs. And essentially that's what happened at Summerhall, is that in trying to hatch them with wildfire, they actually exploded the eggs. And that the energy that's inside the dragon egg can be used through magic to sort of make an explosion. And that could be part of what was involved with the doom of Valyria,
Wow.
why it was so bad. And there's even theories that that's what happened with Hardhome, because we had that maester go to Hardhome and then come back right before it blew up, which makes you wonder if the maesters and the Faceless Men have been experimenting with ways to kill dragons. So that's the only thing I can think of, like, apart from the dragon bomb theory.
I actually...
And
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I just can't think of any other reason to value eggs. Like, hatching a dragon now is not going to matter for the story, really.
Yeah, because they wouldn't have time to grow up. So yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because we know that wildfire as well was involved, and wildfire is some like weird alchemical thing that's kind of maybe got some hints of magic going on, because we know that the pyromancer says something about spells in a Clash of Kings being used to produce it or something like that. So yeah, maybe and it burns really hot, so maybe it's something, wildfire, maybe plus dragon egg, is very volatile, and that something went awry at Summerhall and kaboom. I definitely don't see that as like far-fetched at all, because they're definitely...
Not that crazy, right?
Yeah, because we know from the story that a stone dragon egg is not necessarily a dead dragon egg. There has to be some kind of living component in order for it to be kind of reactivated, you know? B1 Mary to send a super chat. Thank you so much. Just some love for Quinn. Thank you so much for giving me a super chat. It's so appreciated.
Now, at the same time, Summerhall didn't leave a magical fallout zone like Valyria did. So,
Well, it could be... I don't know.
question of scale.
Yeah. Maybe,
Like Valyria would have had thousands of dragon eggs, right?
yeah.
So
And
yeah, it's just a thought. I mean, it's a cool theory. It's like it's not total tinfoil. You never know. I'm just trying to think
it's
of
an
like why would
idea.
faceless men want dragon eggs? Why is George telling us about all these dragon eggs that are lurking around? I mean, it could just be a restoration of the Targaryen like line. Like we'll see at the end of the story, oh, there's baby dragons. The Targaryens are back, but that doesn't really seem right to me.
No, I don't, because this book is called Fire and Blood for a reason. And what it's showing us is that the reign of the Targaryen was very bloody, and it was not just them fighting people outside Targaryens. It was like a lot of them just fighting each other. Like, in fact, I would say like most of the main conflict is the Targaryens versus each other. Like, it's all like, I deserve to be queen, I deserve to be king, you're a usurper, you're a usurper. Like, so there is a tremendous amount of like kind of infighting going on, and yeah, so it wasn't exactly like the best time. So I don't kind of like, I don't buy the whole like bunch of dragons hatching at the end and like new
Yeah.
rise of House Targaryen. That just seems like not where this should be going, I think.
It doesn't seem to fit to me either. So maybe yeah, maybe we'll see some dragon bombs. I don't know, or it could just be the faceless men are trying to like just collect all the dragon eggs so that nobody else has them and nobody can hatch them.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, maybe they just simply don't want dragons
like
to crop up in the world again.
it's like decommissioning, nuclear weapons or whatever.
Yeah. So I want to actually go back to Aegon and his sisters, because I feel like we didn't talk about Rhaenys and Messenia that much. So this book gives you a few more like details on what they were actually like. So I like Visenya a lot more than Rhaenys. Rhaenys is kind of like the sweeter one. She's the prettier one. She's kind of like she's kind of like the opposite to Visenya in every way. She's like the soft, pretty one. And then you've got Visenya, who's more of like the warrior kind of. It says like even her beauty had an edge to it, right? And so she is kind of like the embodiment of kind of like that fire and blood ruthlessness. And the thing is also too, when I think about Daenerys, I kind of almost see her as kind of like a combination of Rhaenys and Visenya. She kind of has elements of like both of them. She's almost like the two of them almost mashed together. She has those like sweet, kind of like innocent, gentle side, but she also has that ruthless Visenya Targaryen, I will kill you side. and yeah, I like seeing all that, and it was really cool. And also the Dornish stuff in the beginning I found to be very intriguing, with the yellow toad, how she's like fat and blind, but she's like full of wits. And what was great about it is that they never caught her. She died on her own terms in her own bed, and they remained unbowed, unbent, unbroken. And I just thought that was so powerful and great, and I really enjoyed that section of the book as well. To kind of see like Aegon's power get checked a little bit. It's like, yeah, you took over Westeros, but like you will not have an easy conquest with Dorne, and you kind of can't help but admire the Dornish people, because they're just very just like they do what they want. They're not gonna bow to you, and in the end they never did bow. They made a treaty, and I just really admire that.
Yeah, you have to like an 88-year-old woman who's like, "This is Dawn. You are not wanted here. Be
Yes.
gone." Like, damn.
Your dragons
Drop
don't
the
scare me.
mic. Yeah, but Visenya is cool. She's more complex, I think, is the thing. Like, Rhaenys is a little bit two-dimensional,
Yeah,
whereas Visenya is very complex. She lives a long time.
more fleshed out.
You could almost say she's kind of like the true steel in a little bit. She's got a little bit of that brittle iron Stannis nature, but she's also like the iron backbone. Like, you kind of wonder if Aegon would have been Aegon without Visenya.
He wouldn't. I love the scene where she's telling him that he needs more protection, and he's like, "No, I don't." And then she cuts him with her own blade. Like, that was a really good scene. She's like, "I could have killed you just then. Of course you need more protection." So
Yeah, she has that older sister vibes. Like Aegon will always be her younger sister to her younger brother to her, or something kind of.
She kept him in check, which is why I don't agree with the idea that she killed him, because it's kind of hinted that maybe she killed him so that Maegor could get Balerion the Black Dread and mount him and reach his full potential. But I don't think that. I think there's a lot of other people that wanted Aegon dead, probably. So I don't think it was Messenia.
Yeah, I think that's a vile calumny, as they say.
But as far as her practicing sorcery, she was. I think so.
That seems likely. People are pointing out in the chat, there is, a lot of people have noticed a little bit of a parallel potentially between Rhaenys and Sansa, and then Messenia and Arya. So that's kind of a fun thing to think about when you read Rhaenys and Messenia.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We'll have to see where Arya ends up. That would be cool. Like, the show sort of presented Sansa and Arya sort of co-ruling Winterfell for a time with Bran, and then now we've got a sort of like Jon-Sansa dynamic with Arya there. So you kind of see how we might end up with a situation where all the remaining siblings of Stark sort of learn how to complement each other and work as a team, much in the way that those three Targaryens did. So that definitely seems like a potential parallel theme that he's sort of developing there, because it's all about teamwork. Like, you see the mistakes that people make in the Dance with the Dragons. Rhaenyra in particular, they don't trust people. They take people for granted. Like, she all of a sudden, because the two betrayers of Tumbleton turned on her, she's like, well, let's just arrest Alan Valerion. And it's like, well, dude,
you're just so discord.
You're just saying, you're just throwing away your entire navy. It's like, you think about that first? Like, no, she's just like, well, I'm paranoid, so let's just axe the Valerians for no reason. It's like her strongest ally.
Yeah, like, why are you just like pissing all over? Yeah, exactly. It's kind of, it reminds me of something I think that Jaehaerys said about, like, you don't need to kind of like be a dick. It's better to like kind of like, you know, talk things out and actually talk to people instead of just kind of reacting. And to actually kind of try and work it out. It's essentially like you'll attract more flies with honey than with vinegar. It's that kind of thing. And you don't
definitely.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, George is really fascinated with leadership and power, and he gives us all range of people, you know, failing in different ways. Yeah. And he's constantly showing you, you know, how difficult it is to rule, which is the whole point of the Iron Throne as a metaphor, of course. So it's a major, major theme of his work. And it's interesting, in all these compressed timeline stories we get, you get a lot of examples of how people failed. And I just thought that was interesting. If you study A Song of Ice and Fire, thinking about power and leadership and stuff, there was a lot to sink your teeth into in this book.
He definitely really gets it. I think this is a great. It's a great. I can't even, because like, okay, I don't know what the reviews for this book are, but I know earlier in the chat before the stream started, some people were saying that it was being kind of reviewed poorly, and like, okay, I think if you pick up this book, like I said earlier, if you pick up this book expecting it to be a novel, then that's not what you're really gonna get. This is a history book. It's got some dialogue in there, but it's not like you're picking up A Song of Ice and Fire and reading a story that it's just a chunk of the history. It's not necessarily a beginning, middle, and end type thing. I feel like the only way you would give it points off for that is if you hadn't read the rest of the books and you didn't understand what you were getting with this novel. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, basically. Yeah, but some people just didn't understand what it was supposed to be, but whatever.
Yeah.
Who cares?
But like I said,
some people are mad. It's not the Where's the Winds of Winter. Well, not. Don't even get us started. We'll get all. Let's not.
Don't even get us started. So
hashtag be nice to George.
Yeah, I like that hashtag. I support that hashtag. Hashtag be nice to George. So I'm like looking at the chat now. I want to ask you guys, if you guys that have read the book, if you guys have any like questions for us, you can like shoot them at us in the chat.
Yeah, now's the time. If we missed anything, I've been looking as we've been going when I can, but if we've missed anything, then tag one of us.
And of course, there's so much in here to talk about that, like, I'm gonna make, of course, way more videos on all this stuff. as I continue to read and scour through everything. And also, I just want to say that I saw that Simon Vance does the audiobook for Fire and Blood, and Simon Vance did the audios for the Dune books, and I think that he's just absolutely the perfect voice to pick up the mantle and do the A Song of Ice and Fire books. He's such a fantastic narrator, and after Roy Dutrieu's passing, I think Simon Vance is an excellent choice, and I hope he continues to narrate the rest of the novels.
Yeah, I got used to it pretty quick. I agree. It was definitely really good. I like Jorah. The Jorah actor and the Viserys actor both are good readers. It's got to be an old man. It really does.
Simon Vance just has that excellent voice. Okay, and his God Emperor of Dune voice, if you watch my God Emperor of Dune video, I'm kind of trying to sound like him. So that's where that voice comes from. But it's Simon Vance. Yeah.
So Kathy Stark asks about our thoughts on the voyage across the Sunset Sea. Well, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Yeah. You may have missed it. I did like how they, like I said, how they turned back. One of them split, came back. One of them kept going. I thought that reminded me a little bit of Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Is that the Narnia book where they sail to the end of the world, basically? I was catching those vibes.
Yeah. So like we said, there's kind of a hint that Alice actually survived. Her ship might have been seen in Asshai. So yeah, that was actually I said earlier, that was my favorite section of the book. I really, really, really enjoyed it. I wish it was way longer. It could have been like 5 times that long. And
so do you think she could be Quaeve?
Oh my god, that's okay. I don't know. Maybe if
she stole dragon's eggs.
Yeah.
Which then are the ones that Dany gets.
Yeah, that's.
Then
totally
she
true.
goes west to go east.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What? Oh my god, dude.
Ends up in Asshai and tells Dany to hatch her dragons and go west to go east.
Dude, you kind of blew my mind.
That wasn't my theory. That came from one of our myth heads. I believe it was. I forget. I'll get back to who it was. It was one of our smart people.
Okay, so I really, really, really like that idea. Like, the only thing we would have to solve is, like, the aging thing, but that's not too difficult because Melisandre
started learning magic, right?
Yeah. I like that. Okay, I feel like that's kind of... I like that idea of her being Quaithe more than any of the other suggestions that I've heard, actually. Because that almost fits too perfectly. Yeah, Shara Seastar is like the next, I think, one over. But I like this idea of Alice Westhill as well. That's really cool. Let me see if we got any more questions.
It's one of the better theories I've seen so far.
Sweet.
And just real quick, there was Joe Magician did a stream today too at the same time. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to move it, but just a quick shout out to him. Him and Bookshelf Stud and Sanrixian just finished a stream about the Night Fort, and he's got some theories, I think, about what future horrors could happen at the Night Fort. So I know, Quinn, you're going to want to check that out. Exactly. So that's on the Joe Magician YouTube channel, guys, if you want to check that out. Later on, you just search for Joe Magician, and you can find it.
Definitely check out Joe Magician's channel. He messaged me earlier today, and he was like, "Oh God, we plan our streams at the same time," and I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know." But yeah, he was very nice about it, and yeah, definitely go check him out. I'll definitely go give it a look too. The Night Fort is definitely one of those places that's super interesting.
He's been really good at picking through little clues and making like very reasonable projections that you could really see coming true. So I'm into his analysis.
He's a really smart guy, definitely. Darklight 6 TV says, "I just came from there." I hope you enjoyed it.
Yep, I see my Hand of the Dragon Sanrixian.
Yes. All right.
So let me pull up real quick. I've got a page full of notes here. Let me see if there's something good on here for us to talk about. I think there was okay. So there's a Lovecraft moment that has to do with the voyage across the Sunset Sea.
Yes.
So you tell me what this sounds like. All right. It says, Her dreams were full of sundering rivers and windswept plains
Mm-hmm.
and towering mountains with their shoulders in the clouds, of green islands verdant in the sun, of strange beasts no man had tamed and queer fruits no man had tasted, of golden cities shining underneath strange stars. She was not the first to dream this dream. This is her before she sails over the sea. This is a description of her dreaming of what lands could be there. It sounds very like Randolph Carter's recurring dream of the shining golden city that he's always trying to find his way back to but can't.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't
Dream Quest for Unknown Kadath.
That's
Yes. So yeah, that definitely sounds like Dream Quest for Unknown Kadath. That's one of my favorite. See, that Lovecraft story is interesting because it's kind of like not his typical kind of story. It's kind of more like a fantasy kind of thing. It's about this guy that goes on a journey through the dreamlands and he encounters all this stuff. And he ends up encountering actually
The old
now let that happen.
Yeah, my favorite part of that is the horned goat-like old one creatures that live on
Yeah.
Lang.
That was a really good one. So, like George R. Martin is. I actually talked about this in one of the podcasts that I did back in the day. But yeah, that's a really cool reference, and I definitely like that a lot. I wonder if she found her Sunset City, because spoiler, Randall Carter. Well, I guess he technically does, but there's kind of a twist, and I don't really want to give it away. But yeah, you should definitely read that story. It's kind of a collection of like 3 different short stories actually. But yeah, that's definitely.
It's one of the ones that George drew from. There's several elements that were borrowed from that one.
Yeah, definitely one of the ones I like. Let's see.
Well,
I want to. Okay. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I thought the Dragon Keepers were cool. We never heard about those before.
Oh,
like
yeah,
these black armored people that sort of manned the Dragon Pit.
They protected the Dragon Pit because ever since, what's her name, Arya stole Balerion, they were like, we're gonna protect the dragons now. So they created this like new order of like people to protect the dragons. Which is very interesting because they totally failed. We know they failed because like there's the event obviously where the dragons in the pit get slaughtered by the people. So where were they then? We're protecting the dragons then. Yeah, but I thought one of the funnier bits of this book was the confessions of Mushroom the Fool. He has a lot of like scandalous observations. No much of it you can like take seriously and what you can't. I think this was just George's opportunity to kind of be like, I don't know, just kind of like a little bit scandalous and just kind of like give us some kind of salacious moments because there's a lot of kind of salacious stuff going on about the Targaryens and like rumors and you don't know much of it you can take seriously.
Well, it's a skillful addition to the unreliable narrator conceit of the Maester's writing it, because it gives you the other side. So he can give you the Maester's voice like, well, we must surely disregard this vile calumny, but it gives you a way to like sort of slip in these seedier aspects. And also you can feel the Maester's like genuine quest for knowledge. They're like, well, this is the only information we have on this meeting, and it happens to come from mushrooms. So here it is. Take it with a grain of salt, But we could do a whole live stream on Mushroom's version of everything. It's pretty fun.
I cracked up so much reading it because it was just always like, but in Mushroom's version of the tale it says this. And I was just like, and it's always the most effed up telling of the story. It's just like every bit of it paints the Targaryens just like these perverted, like kind of like monsters. And in some cases perhaps it's not that far from the truth. I mean, some of them were kind of like perverted, messed up monsters. But then again, some of everybody's like that. So let's see. Oh yeah, there was mention of. I also took a note about Sir Lucamore, who was one of the King's Guards who broke his sacred vows. Right. So the King's Guard, as we know, he was one of Jaehaerys' men. As we know, they're not supposed to take wives. They're not supposed to have kids. This dude broke both those rules. He had several wives, several children, and so as a punishment, Jaehaerys takes away his children's names. Essentially, he gives them all bastard names, and he sends this guy to the wall. I just thought that was kind of funny because it was like he just couldn't. He just couldn't. So I kind of also wish kind of Jaehaerys had made a fucking example out of this guy and kind of like was harsher towards him so that no one ever did that again. I'm not sure if anyone ever did.
Well, he gelded him and sent him to the wall.
Yeah.
And like you said, dispossessed all his children. But yeah, what a crazy dude. Like, not just one secret wife, but like 4. It was like, okay.
Multiple secret wives.
Go hard, man. Go hard, Luke.
And children, like tons of children. Like, how did he keep it secret for as long as he did? Yeah, I just thought that was...
Like, how did he have time to do any Kingsguarding?
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's kind of impressive, actually, when you think about it.
So here, check this out. A random detail I thought was cool. During the storming of the Dragon Pit, the followers of the Shepherd made dragon skin cloaks from the wing membranes of Taraxes.
Wow. Yeah.
That was fucking like kind of creepy.
Yeah. That's a cool thing. I wonder what a dragon skin is like in clothing. That's got to be like the most valuable like clothing article in like all of freaking the world of Ice and Fire.
And also, to me, looking at it in terms of symbolism, this implies somebody skin changing a dragon, which could be Bran, or it could be a clue that, you know, the dragon, blood of the dragon link is a mutation, a mutated form of skin changing.
Yeah.
It makes me think about those things.
So we talk, I think I just mentioned a little bit about how like a big part of this book is like the faith versus the Targaryens because of them committing incest. So it starts off, they're not okay with it, but Aegon doesn't give a crap and he just makes them okay with it. But then they weren't okay with it for his children, and there's actually kind of a significant struggle. It's like kind of a big deal. Like it's like the Faith Militant puts up more of a fight than you would think. And I like that George R. R. Martin does this because it kind of illustrates even the Targaryens with all their power and their dragons, when it comes to faith and people's religion and being able to manipulate that, that's one of the most powerful things imaginable, is kind of people that kind of have a faith. And it makes you think about how much power the faith actually has in Westeros, because just simply by saying we don't like this, they're kind of like rallying the people, because to them, I always bring this up, it's not just a matter of just like wrong and right, it's like kind of a matter of like heaven and hell. It's a serious thing. It's like they're using the word abomination, so it's kind of like the head of your country is something that's kind of like foul and evil and against the will of your gods. So the gods might punish the people for what the rulers are doing. So if you tap into that fear, it's very easy to manipulate people. And I think George R. R. Martin does a good job in demonstrating that in this book when it comes to that conflict. And that was also one of the things that I really picked up on and connected with in this book as well.
Yeah, it makes you think of Varys talking to Tyrion, where he's like, well, there's a priest and a sellsword and a king, and there's a rich man and a king and a priest, and they're all telling the sellsword who to kill. And it's like, well, who does he kill? And the lesson is power is wherever men think it is.
Yes.
And so George is showing you the different kinds of power. You can have dragon power, but there's also a political power that comes from the head of a church if people believe in that faith. That belief is strong, and you've seen over and over that when the Targaryens tried to not negotiate with the faith but just run it over, it did not work.
No.
It did not work out. They were always sorry about it. So at the end, you see the successful kings essentially negotiating with the faith because they're another power center that you have to deal with, and you can't ignore them. Simple as that.
Yeah, like you said, it's a different kind of power. Targaryens have fire and blood, and they have literally faith. So that was a cool part of the book as well. And there's so much. There's so much more. There's so many like tiny details and large details, and we could have 10 streams talking about this book. But I think we're getting ready to wrap it up in a little bit here. So if you guys have any final questions before we head out and get off this stream, we've been going for just over about 2 hours, I think. So if you guys
Can I just say, Quinn, that this book was a great. It has some great confirmation for my basic moon theory. It really did, and a lot of it was Septon Moon stuff. So For example, here's Moon when he died. Let's see here. It's really great. So, but then suddenly there was a groan and a woman's shriek, followed by a bellow of rage. The tent flap was thrown open, and the woman burst out, half naked and barefoot, dashed away wide-eyed and terrified before any of the poor fellows could think to stop her. Septon Moon himself followed a moment later, naked, roaring, drenched in blood. He was holding his neck, and the blood leaked between his fingers and dripped down into his beard from where his throat had been slit open. It is said that Moon staggered through half the camp, lurching from campfire to campfire in pursuit of the doxy who had cut him. Finally, even his great strength failed him. He collapsed and died as his acolytes pressed around him, wailing their grief. So the whole thing about the moon is that the meteors that come from the moon, in my theory, are basically they're bleeding stars. And Martin's running this whole symbol of moon blood as being like this tide of bleeding stars that comes from the moon when it's destroyed or cracked or whatever. And so you've got this guy named Moon running around bleeding into campfires, which gives you the like fire and blood coming from the moon symbolism right there. And then it gets better because they fight over his mortal remains. It says the possession of Moon's mortal remains became itself a bone of contention, and people are fighting over it and using it as a talisman. And so what's that? Well, that's the moon meteor that people are using as a powerful talisman. So then, best of all, when they're talking about the threat of more people rising like Septon Moon, someone says, well, there are other moons out there.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, there's more than one moon. There was two moons. Yeah. One of them wandered too close to the sun, cracked open, and poured out dragons. And one day the other moon will kiss the sun too. So there's other moons out there. I thought that was great.
Moon meteors. Yeah, I think that's really freaking cool. I like that a lot.
I was tickled.
Oh yeah, someone brought up this. Moody Wolf says the Valyrians used to say all gods need to be honored, none of them should be feared. Yeah, that's one thing about the Valyrians that I liked in this, because it's like they had many gods. They feared none of them. So the Valyrians kind of had this different relationship with their gods when compared to the Faith of the Seven and even like the First Men. It's kind of like a whole different deal. It's like they don't fear their gods. It's kind of they work with them almost. So that's very interesting. I'd like to know more actually about that ancient Valyrian religion. I know that Balerion and Vagar and Meraxes were named for some of the ancient Valyrian gods, and I'd be curious as to know which ones and what their aspects were, you know? So that would be some curious thing to get some information on in the future. The religions of the ancient Valyrians. Let's see.
I've got somebody in here asking a good question about... Let's see, where was it? How did Tyenna heal Maegor, or did she resurrect him? I never thought about that before. But Tyenna was clearly a magician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is it possible that that Maegor was like undead? I don't know. I'd have to go back and look for clues to see if there's like word clues.
Yeah.
About there.
I'm
not sure.
We definitely have to see. She definitely has some magical characteristics. There's definitely some witchy stuff going on with her. Yeah, it would be interesting to see if there's some more hints at whether or not that was going on. We'll see. We'll see in the future. I mean, we've got so much time to really like scrape this book and see all the little details. Ideas by Survivor. Do you think the mention of Aegon visiting cities in Westeros prior to the conquering contained any devils? The placement of information seemed odd. I mean, they lived on Dragonstone, so I mean, I feel like it's kind of like natural that he would visit other places in Westeros.
Yeah, I feel like the point of that was just to say that it wasn't purely Aegon invading Westeros because Orys Baratheon cut off the hands of his messenger. Like, he had already painted the table, he had already been visiting, which means probably sowing the seeds and testing the waters. So I think that was the point of that narrative there. It was like, Aegon was planning on doing this.
And, and I guess I can bring up, too, in case no one's familiar with this, is that George R. R. Martin said recently okay, this, I don't want to like lead anyone anywhere, but he said that some have speculated that Aegon decided to conquer the Seven Kingdoms because he knew about the White Walkers, the threat of the others. Now, as far as I can pick up, in this book, there's no really solid hints at that. And I think
he doesn't act like that, really, does he?
Yeah,
He doesn't
there's like
go to
some
the wall.
contradicting...
He doesn't care about the Starks.
Yeah, there's like nothing in his behavior that would really suggest that. But then again, I'm like, George R. R. Martin usually doesn't like even mention that kind of stuff, so it's like kind of confusing as to why he brought it up.
I figured this out. I think that what George is doing, in that quote, George is attempting to tell us about hearsay. He's like, well, some people have speculated. So what I think is the truth is that there were Targaryens who were concerned about the others in the Wall, but it wasn't Aegon. It was Rhaegar. It was Aemon, Maester Aemon. It was... there might have been one other too, I think. Egg.
Egg, yeah.
Duncan Egg. You know, there were some who were definitely looking that way, I think. But it just was, we don't see many clues that it was Aegon. You do wonder about Jaehaerys and Alysanne, though.
Yeah.
They, not only the shutting down of the Night Fort, but the most annoying thing is that they refer real quickly to Jaehaerys going north of the Wall and fighting giants and wargs.
Yeah. And
it's like this one-line thing. I'm like, can we hear about that?
That was so out of like left field. I was like, what? And it just like never mentioned again. That was really, really weird. And I wonder, I feel like Alysanne was definitely suspicious of something, right? Because she definitely was kind of just like disturbed by the fact that her dragon wouldn't fly north too. She was like, what's going on here? Looks like I got another super chat. Bridget Walsh, just a tip for Quinn. Thanks, man. Thank you so much for your super chat, and thanks everyone for joining us on the stream today, and thanks everyone for just supporting the channel in general. And also, if you've been watching and you've been enjoying the stream, don't forget to leave a like before you click off. This is my first time saying that in 2 hours of streaming, but yeah, if you're here now, please leave a like. Really helps out. It's great. There's like 300 of you. Come on. Hit the like button. Thumbs up. Do it now. Stop what you're doing and do it.
Absolutely. Give us a like, guys. And then like I mentioned earlier, if you want more Fire and Blood talk, well, there will be lots of it, of course. But me and several of my Mythhead friends, including Aziz from History of Westeros, will be going tomorrow on my channel at 3 Eastern. And we'll be talking about some of the wicked symbolism that's going on in here. So I'll just drop the link to my stuff real quick. Come and check us out.
Thank you so much, Julie Beth, for your super chat. And I'll see you later. I'll see you later, Julie. But yeah, it looks like we don't have too many more questions going on. And yeah, I think we're gonna wrap things up. We've been streaming for approximately 2 hours. So yeah, so there's still, like, even talking for 2 hours about this, there is actually a tremendous amount of stuff that we didn't cover. We covered a lot of the I took a lot of notes on a lot of the stuff that really stood out to me, but there's still a lot of stuff that's in there that we'll be talking about for months and months to come. And yeah, the stream, it's been really great talking to you guys. Make sure you check out LML's channel, his Mythical Astronomy podcast. And don't forget to check out his stream tomorrow on his channel with Aziz, like he just mentioned, as well as some other great people. And make sure you like this video, as I said. Follow me on Twitter for all my updates. Check me out on Facebook. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And, yeah. You said everything, LML. Want to, like, wave to the people?
Bye, everyone. I will, actually, parting word, I will just say that, a lot of you are on this page already, but as you read Fire and Blood, don't just, think about the story that you're hearing. Look for potential parallels to characters in the main story, because this is why this book is so exciting. It's not just that it's history, it's because George is putting all kinds of foreshadowing through events and character parallels to the main story. So if you think about that when you read it, every once in a while, a little light bulb will go off above your head, and you'll feel smart, and you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Victarion's arm is made of worms.
It's fireworms. All right, guys. It's been a pleasure.
I wouldn't complain. I will just say I would not complain if Victarion's arm like turns into like a tentacle.
Just... Oh, hilarious. All right, guys, it's been great. I'll see you guys later. Peace.